Upon Sayek's arrival at the Hunter Academy competition, he astonished one of the most formidable predators on the planet. As soon as the contest commenced, everyone became aware something was profoundly amiss. Sequentially, the pupils surged towards him. Armed with all the skills they had honed, they were ultimately vanquished by nothing more than his unadorned fists. No ostentatious ability, no extraordinary armament, merely impeccable timing and formidable power. Even the authorities and the guild observers monitoring from above could hardly fathom what they were witnessing. And when Sayek arrived at the finale and obliterated the foremost pupil of the academy, the whole venue was plunged into disorder. Just as everyone believed the competition had concluded, Lee Se-yoon personally took to the stage. A globally ranked predator, a behemoth in comparison to typical students. In contrast to the rest, she swiftly realized that Sayek was concealing something far more perilous than mere physical strength. Their conflict compelled Sayek to exert himself more than anyone else had. His physique decelerated. His respiration became labored. Exhaustion started to weigh him down, and that was the moment Sayek ultimately unveiled the formidable strength he had concealed. He kindled his obsidian blaze, not to incinerate his adversary, but to obliterate the very notion of exhaustion itself. In a flash, his weary form revived. His velocity re-emerged, his strength surged once more. And for the initial time, even Lee Se-yoon was compelled to acknowledge that the individual before her was no ordinary novice. How did this individual attain such strength? The tale commences with our master of ceremonies, Hyeon Sayek, recounting his journey into an alternate realm where he is called upon to deliver salvation. Following 2 decades in this unfamiliar realm, he discovers himself confronting the formidable boss creature, together with 3 of his companions, a holy woman, a sorcerer, and a warrior. The chief adversary praises Sayek, acknowledging that he has fought remarkably well for an individual reputed to be a hero. Sayek playfully retorts, remarking that the boss doesn't appear to be in great shape either. The chief creature lacks a sense of humor, and this infuriates him greatly, prompting him to lunge at Sayek with a fierce strike. Nonetheless, Sayek deflects his strike with his lance, producing a resounding clash. In the meantime, the sorcerer is attempting to provide assistance from the rear, and the formidable creature menaces to rip Sayek asunder if he declines to yield to him. The beast brags that the territory they inhabit is a realm crafted by his fangs and talons. The two persist in striking at one another, unleashing forceful blows. Yet Sayek quickly grows weary of everything, and concludes that it is moment to terminate the conflict. He energizes his spear using a technique known as the paradox flame and strikes the boss with his assault. This leads to a tremendous detonation, which propels the beast soaring into the far-off expanse, obliterating rocks during the procedure. The pair recommences their savage confrontation of strikes, rendering the others present appear like infants. Sayek successfully strikes the creature, yet it claims that it is inconsequential to him since the assault is too gentle. Nevertheless, Sayek promptly informs him of how significantly it can diminish his hubris. With his spear ablaze, Sayek inflicts a strike upon the creature's form, and on this occasion, the creature comprehends the extent of his predicament. He plummets to the earth as the fire consumes his flesh. The creature praises Sayek, expressing that he never anticipated encountering anyone powerful enough to fell him. And Sayek informs him that he does not originate from their refuse-filled realm. The supervisor is skeptical of this as he presumes that Sayek is merely spouting drivel. Nevertheless, he is certain that his physical form will merge with the earth, and one day he will be revived. Abruptly, he observes that he is being obliterated, and Sayek taunts him, inquiring whether he has finally grasped the circumstances. Sayek informs him that the obsidian blaze searing him is his unique talent, which he has designated as paradox flame. He notes that, in contrast to conventional fires that ignite with oxygen, it utilizes abstract notions as its source of energy. Sayek informs the creature that he may have had the ability to revive himself innumerable times in the future, but the fire that is presently consuming him will thwart any possibility of that occurring again, as his very being is being obliterated. The formidable adversary then attempts to taunt Sayek, asserting that while he may have vanquished him, he will never be commemorated as the champion who salvaged the planet, as the individuals he considers his peers are merely biding their time for him to perish in the conflict. Sayek responds, indicating that he is already aware of this. The Saintess swiftly interjects, informing Sayek that he should not trust the statements of a creature. Nevertheless, Sayek begins with the Saintess herself, asserting that she has been professing her affection for him, yet in truth, she loathes him for being an interloper. Evidently, all of her seductive efforts were merely components of the scheme. Thus, when the moment ultimately arrived to overpower him, he would struggle to assault her. The Saintess is taken aback upon discovering that Sayek is indeed correct. Sayek proceeds by stating that he realizes the sorcerer and warrior are similar to her. It appears that the knight has previously received a national artifact from the sovereign, serving as a recompense for vanquishing Sayek. Evidently, the emperor feared that Sayek would usurp his throne. Regarding the sorcerer, he has a passion for human experimentation and harbors a deep animosity towards Sayek, who stands against the institution of slavery. Sayek informs them that he has been aware of all these truths for the last 5 years. The beast is astounded to learn this, and he inquires of Sayek why he doesn't simply seize control of the world with his strength. Sayek discloses that he possesses no desire to engage in this activity, as he simply wishes to return to his residence. Evidently, 2 decades prior, in the year 2005, Sayek was an unremarkable 20-year-old office employee until a divine being summoned him to this realm. The goddess informs Sayek that he has been brought to this world to rescue it. Upon Sayek's entry into this realm, he quickly discerned that it was a dreadful place. Sayek exerted every effort to return to his previous life, yet the deity informed him that he must vanquish the creatures and rescue the world. As there was but a single path to return to Earth, Sayek commenced rigorous training to combat the creatures, describing the sheer chaos of this realm. He once saved a young boy from the war zone. However, the troops refuse to permit him entry into the village. They urge him to abandon the child, as it seems he is on the verge of death. This proved to be a cursed realm that would opt to forsake the injured rather than save them, as if this isn't already more dire. Their substandard standards of medical care and sanitation exacerbate the situation further. At one instance, they even removed a soldier's limb due to a minor infection. Although he succeeded in bringing the youngster to the hamlet, Sayek encountered yet another issue, which were the zealots of faith. The spiritual authorities in the hamlet believed that the youngster was capable of enduring due to a malevolent spirit inhabiting him. They recommended that they purify him with flames, as they were already performing a ritual of exorcism. As if it were trivial, the men were incinerating individuals as if they were mere timber. Sayek is utterly astounded, as he cannot fathom how he ended up in a realm devoid of any notion of human rights. Despite this, Sayek persevered for an additional 2 decades, and at last he has triumphed over the beast to rescue the planet. Sayek is thankful that it has ultimately concluded. The warrior readies himself to assault Sayek, expressing his satisfaction in knowing that they cannot permit him to survive. Sayek faces the man, expressing his profound disdain for their existence. At this juncture, even the knight realizes that he lacks the capability to confront Sayek. He understands that they essentially fashioned a beast to subdue another beast. At that moment, Sayek gazes up at the heavens and calls out to the deity, urging her to fulfill her vow since he has already salvaged the world, precisely as she promised. Abruptly, the heavens part, and the deity materializes, praising him for withstanding so much. Nonetheless, Sayek is unprepared for her commendations and reminds her of her pledge to return him to Earth. The deity inquires of Sayek whether he truly harbors disdain for this realm. Despite the fact that he has acquired significant influence to pose a danger to her, she informs him that should he come back to Earth, all of his accomplishments as a champion will amount to nothing. Sayek urges the deity to cease her antics, confident that she is pleased with his departure, to which the goddess concurs, proclaiming that the world is no longer in need of a creature. Nevertheless, she inquires whether he will not remorse his choice to return, and Sayek informs her that his sole wish is to return to the realm he formerly inhabited. Sayek is already weary of this existence that has led him through torment, and the deity fulfills his desire. A radiant golden glow envelops Sayek, and the deity informs Sayek that his corporeal form on Earth has succumbed, which is the reason she intends to transfer his spirit into a new vessel. Sayek is taken aback by this revelation and inquires of the goddess about his future identity. The goddess informs him that she is unable to provide a comprehensive explanation. Yet she informs him that it is a physique diminished for a miserable conclusion. Nevertheless, she is quite confident that he will endure, as that is what he excels at. Sayek informs the deity that he is indifferent, for as long as he makes his way back to the earthly realm, he is certain to endure in comparison to the challenges he has encountered in his wretched world. Shortly thereafter, Sayek awakens in his new form, and he currently finds himself in the year 2025. It appears that he has assumed the identity of an individual named Chan Sayek. Sayek rises from the bed, feeling a sense of relief that he is no longer compelled to confront the betrayer's intent on ending his life. He subsequently notices a reflection in the chamber. He approaches the mirror to examine his refreshed look. This is the moment it it truly occurs to him that he has returned to the planet. He surveys the space to ensure there is pristine water available for his use, in stark contrast to the refuse-laden realm from which he hails. Creating fire is also simple compared to frantically chopping wood. Sayek rejoices as this is what he has longed for, and he even discovers a container of chicken on the table. Without a moment's pause, he seizes the poultry, and merely a hint of it drives him wild with exhilaration. He sheds tears of happiness as he can at last savor food once more after enduring years of torment. As he revels in his entry onto the planet, he overlooks a vivid crimson glow emerging in the center of the road. As the planet is presently in the year 2025, he recognizes that this realm and the realm from which he was abducted adhere to the same temporal progression. Nevertheless, he is not particularly worried about this, since regardless of how challenging and harsh life on Earth may be, he is convinced it will never compare to the dire conditions of the other realm from which he has recently returned. Once he finishes his meal, Sayek enters the restroom to take a soothing shower and relish the advantages of technology following the air conditioning. He approaches the window to gaze at the unclouded sky, attempting to absorb all that he has overlooked in a single moment. He is contemplating his future when a grotesque creature suddenly materializes at the window, gazing intently at Sayek. Sayek yells in terror, questioning what he is witnessing. At that moment, a public proclamation reverberates throughout the vicinity, informing all inhabitants that a deterioration gap has emerged within the residential building. Sayek is entirely bewildered by the announcements being made over the public address system. The broadcaster proceeds by imploring all inhabitants to retreat to the subterranean refuge without delay. Sayek continues to be astonished until he observes that the whole window is now obscured by creatures attempting to invade the residence. Sayek jolts back to reality as the window shatters and the creatures navigate their way into the structure. Sayek dashes away, contemplating the nature of the creatures. As they pursue him, Sayek's cleverness rescues him as he vaults through a window and conceals himself on the ledge to await the creatures' departure. When they have moved on, he ascends once more and exhales a breath of relief that he has at last evaded the creatures. Abruptly, he notices a child in the far-off distance and hurries towards the young boy, inquiring about his presence in such a perilous location. He proposes that they swiftly return to the safe haven. However, the young boy is primarily preoccupied with the creature he spotted previously, as he is eager to eliminate it. He inquires of Sayek whether he would like to accompany him, and Sayek glares at him in revulsion, questioning what on earth the guy is talking about. It appears that the planet has remained in this state for 13 years. As the child is unwilling to seek refuge in the shelter, Sayek has no alternative but to accompany him, ultimately ending up alongside the youngster. The child subsequently clarifies to him that a deterioration crevice is an aperture through which creatures emerge, and nobody understands the reasons behind their formation or the timing and locations of their emergence. Upon receiving this information, Sayek begins to reflect on the torment he endured in the alternate realm only to come back to Earth and discover it in a dreadful condition as well. The child is astonished that he must clarify matters to Sayek and inquires why he is uninformed. Sayek fabricates a story, claiming that he resided in America. However, this merely ignites yet another dispute as individuals are unable to transition from the US to Korea. The child gazes at Sayek with a bewildered expression, completely perplexed by the topic at hand. Sayek successfully steers the conversation away from himself and inquires about the hunter the kid mentioned he admires. The child responds that her name is Lee Seon. The youth states that Seon is affiliated with the Janabi Guild and holds the 10th position on Earth. Evidently, her primary armament is a colossal sword, and she is presently in Cherwon addressing a corrosion rift. Given the manner in which the boy is divulging all he understands about Seon, Sayek can only exhale a breath of relief that he managed to divert the conversation from himself. Nevertheless, he remains perplexed by the reality that an ordinary human is battling a creature akin to those from the other realm he originated from. The fellow is still enumerating every detail Sayek ought to be aware of when Sayek abruptly places a hand over his mouth, urging him to cease his chatter. They glance around the bend to observe 5 creatures on the horizon. Nonetheless, Sayek manages to discern that there is an additional creature concealed, bringing the total to 6. Sayek is grateful that the physique he inhabits possesses a certain degree of physical prowess. Having grown accustomed to battling numerous adversaries, Sayek reflects that confronting the beasts will not pose a challenge. Nevertheless, the issue lies with the child accompanying him, and just as he pivots to glance at the man, he is already trembling. Sayek is unable to fathom that all of his resolve to eliminate creatures has vanished upon encountering one directly. He continues to feel perplexed about his next steps as he is unarmed. But abruptly, he perceives the existence of mana in the atmosphere. As soon as he verifies that it mirrors the one in the alternate realm, Sayek resolves to confront the creatures. He emerges from his concealed location and strikes one of them with the contradiction fire. Sayek is grateful that he can still possess the ability that was imprinted in his essence in the alternate realm. Although the intensity may not meet his expectations, he is confident that it is more than sufficient for his aspirations. The creature's cranium incinerates in excruciating torment. The child praises Sayek, expressing that his actions were astonishing. He promptly refers to Sayek as his mentor, asserting that he possesses an extraordinary talent, and Sayek realizes that exceptional methods are regarded as distinctive on the planet. The creature continues to smolder as the man resolves that he must verify the slaying. He hastens towards the spot where the fire remains lit, as Sayek attempts to caution him against approaching the blaze until the objective has been eliminated. Just as he is on the verge of being harmed, Sayek intervenes like Superman, shielding the fire with his bare hands, sustaining injuries in the effort. Sayek encourages the child to refrain from viewing online content, as reality is evidently distinct from films. Sayek subsequently acquires the equipment that he is grasping, utilizing it to slash through the beasts charging at them. Sayek accomplishes this with such proficiency that it seems as though he wields an authentic blade, departing the young lad entirely astounded by what he is observing. He praises Sayek, inquiring whether he is a covert tracker. Conversely, Sayek is not entirely satisfied with the way his new existence has commenced, since he has essentially returned to the existence he was attempting to flee from. Shortly thereafter, they reach the refuge, and Sayek opts to label the child a rascal, rather than viewing him as a primary school student. As soon as they enter the refuge, the boy's mother catches sight of him and calls out his name, which happens to be Yoon Seong. She hurries to her son, expressing gratitude to Sayek for delivering him to the refuge unharmed, as she realizes it must have been challenging. As the lady is occupied embracing her child and everything, Sayek observes that she adorns herself with luxurious items, indicating their affluence. Sayek swiftly deduces the reason behind Siang's spoiled behavior, and abruptly the exterior barrier is shattered by a beast. Chaos quickly erupts as individuals rush to find refuge. They are unable to fathom that the external barrier has been raised, and while everyone is fleeing, Xiang summons Sayek to accompany them. Nonetheless, Sayek remains in fury due to he struggles to comprehend that all he desired was to revert to an ordinary existence, yet he finds himself inexplicably entangled in chaos. Frustration simmers within him as he questions whether his expectations are excessive. He gazes at his hand that was scorched while rescuing Xiang, prior to addressing him by the moniker he assigned, which is Rascal. Sayek inquires of Xiang why he is endeavoring to become a hunter when his family is evidently affluent. Sayek is aware that the guy could simply conceal himself in a cozy refuge, avoiding any conflict altogether. At that moment, Xiang discloses the heartbreaking reality of how he was bereaved of his father by a creature. Evidently, a deterioration fissure emerged in the subterranean shelter where they had taken refuge. They were all convinced of their security, yet this was the precise moment when Xiang comprehended the brutal reality that no place on Earth is truly secure. Xiang asserts that he may not possess great strength at present, but he intends to evolve into the most formidable hunter to eliminate all the corrosion rifts. He possesses the ability to rescue the planet. Xiang proclaims this with unwavering resolve, and informs Sayek that he may seem foolish to him, but Sayek interrupts, stating that he is truly destined to become an exceptional hunter. Nevertheless, he astonishes him by revealing that he will be incapable of rescuing the planet. Xiang's mother is already in a state of alarm, urging her son that it is time for them to depart. Xiang is reluctant, as Sayek remains positioned in front of the creature. Abruptly, they notice a radiant glow behind them, and as they pivot, they are astonished to witness that Sayek has already defeated the creature using his contradictory fire. Sayek informs Xiang that he will not be capable of rescuing the planet, as he would have accomplished it by now. With a grin on his lips, Sayek informs Xiang that rescuing the planet is a responsibility for someone who has previously accomplished it. Once everything had calmed and Sayek had assured Xiang that he would rescue the planet, he merely withdrew to his flat to engage in video gaming and consume unhealthy snacks. Although he assured everyone with great certainty that he would rescue the world, that assurance was short-lived due to his lack of ambition, as he was surrounded by plenty of sustenance and video games for entertainment. Furthermore, Sayek believes he is redundant as there are already individuals tirelessly laboring to safeguard the planet. Then Sayek grabs his phone to request additional snacks, and this is the moment he realizes that he has completely exhausted his severance compensation. It becomes apparent that the former occupant of the body was a worker at a logistics firm, but he was laid off when the business collapsed as a result of a financial crisis. It then occurs to him that he must seek employment now that he has depleted his funds. He has previously attempted to secure a position, but this is challenging due to the lack of accessible job opportunities. To the persistent emergence of deterioration fissures. In reality, numerous enterprises are already shuttering their operations, leaving Sayek utterly bewildered about his next steps. He is reclining on his bed in exasperation when an alert appears on his phone regarding hunter enlistment. Having acquired experience in this field, Sayek proceeds to the Hunter Association. Upon entering the structure, he encounters numerous individuals who are present with the intention of becoming hunters. Sayek listens to two individuals discussing how the selection procedure is merely a formality, as what is now required for selection is to demonstrate a distinctive talent. All appears to be proceeding ordinarily when the illustrious Sion arrives at the venue, inevitably inciting turmoil among the hopefuls. The aspirants are all delighted to encounter her, as they had presumed she would be unavailable due to her expedition to Kiwon to conquer a corrosion rift. The candidates surmise that the Gina B team must have dispatched Sion herself to evaluate the most promising among them, yet this raises the inquiry of whom they are truly seeking. It appears that the individual in question is a contender named Han Sanga, an alumnus of the academy, and her activated skill is electrokinesis. As Sion peruses her dossier, she playfully mocks Sanga regarding her ability, inquiring if she can recharge batteries. Her aide promptly interjects, clarifying that the young woman is a hunter, not a source of energy. He informs her that there are whispers suggesting that Sanga possesses remarkable talent with her skills, indicating that she is likely to be quite valuable. Sion's other aide interjects, asserting that tracking and eroding rifts constitutes genuine warfare. Despite the candidates excelling at the academy, there are numerous instances where they fail to attain remarkable outcomes in real combat situations. Sion praises the individual for his cleverness and rewards him with a piece of candy, while the other individual observes in disdain. Sion is acutely aware that rehearsal and actual warfare are entirely distinct, which is why it will be challenging for academy pupils who have solely experienced secure training to withstand genuine conflict. She presumes that it will require considerable time for Sanga to ultimately acclimatize. Shortly thereafter, the MC appears on the stage to greet the audience at the venue. He informs them that the opening contest is imminent and Sion aspires for Sanga to enhance her worth sufficiently to persuade her. The host subsequently informs the audience that the initial contender is intriguing since he is a non-combatant who is not affiliated with the Hunter Academy, which is rather uncommon. The presenter is eager to discover what sort of courage Sion possesses to take the stage, and by announcing Sion's name, he is presented to the audience. His rival likewise ascends the platform, and the host articulates the regulations of the contest. He informs them that personal armaments, aside from those supplied by the organization, are prohibited. Furthermore, causing life-endangering wounds is forbidden. At his core, Sion is merely preoccupied with preserving the planet while enjoying good food and embracing life on his own terms. To achieve this, he determines that the initial step is to attain positive outcomes in the competition. As soon as all preparations are complete, the official commences the game. Meanwhile, Sion's adversary ignites his spear, taunting Sion by calling him a worthless fool incapable of harnessing mana. The individual hasn't accomplished anything, yet he ridicules Sion, urging him to reflect on his defeat and dignity. He rushes towards Sion, proclaiming himself as the indomitable spear expert of the Hunter Academy. At that moment, the guy abruptly realizes that he cannot locate defeat Seok. Prior to him grasping the situation, Seok manifests alongside him and he strikes him in the abdomen, triggering a surge of agony throughout his physique. Seok doesn't halt there as he unleashes an uppercut to the man's skull, sending him sprawling. The man collapses to his knees in agony, having lost several teeth. Seok is astounded that the man is already on the floor, especially since he was restraining himself to avoid causing any harm to the individual. Seok merely presumes that the individual is a novice, which is the reason for his frailty, as he is unwilling to accept that this is simply the typical level of weakness among hunters. In the meantime, Seon observed Seok's actions and she was astounded. She promptly retrieves her tablet to perform a background investigation on Seok. She discovers that he was merely an ordinary individual employed at a logistics firm and lacks any mana within his system. One of Seon's aides suggests that Seok's strike may have been a fluke, but Seon offers him a piece of worthless candy, effectively signaling him to remain silent. Seon informs them that Seok is deliberately refraining from gathering mana. Returning to the arena, Seok resolves to conclude the battle definitively, as he must demonstrate his proficiency. Seok subsequently pursues his adversary, and the guy nearly loses his composure upon noticing Seok approaching him. Seok guarantees him that it will not be a lethal injury, so there's no need for concern. Despite his assurance to take it easy on the guy, Seok ultimately knocks him out completely, securing the first victory of the day. This astonishes every official, and Seon observes that the other factions are already deliberating their next steps. Nonetheless, Seon intends to act before them to determine what Seok is truly capable of. Seon rises to depart, and when her co-workers inquire about her destination, she discloses that she needs to meet with the association president. As the contest advances, Seok persistently eliminates his rivals with considerable ease. Seok is disheartened by the sheer ineptitude of the so-called new hunters. He isn't even employing any arms against them, as he is occupied pummeling them with his unprotected hands. Seok is ultimately disheartened by the instruction provided at the Hunter Academy, as he is yet to encounter a single capable contender. Shortly thereafter, Seok advances to the finale, where he is set to compete against Sangha. All are depending on her to halt Seok's commanding streak. As soon as Sangha ascends the platform, Seok praises her, stating that she is the sole individual he has encountered who has amassed the greatest amount of mana compared to all others. Conversely, Sangha informs Seok that he has progressed significantly due to fortune, but she cautions him that there will be no further serendipity. Sangha seizes her blade, proclaiming that she has discerned Seok's lack of distinctive abilities, which explains his tendency to strike at everything in his path. Nevertheless, she informs him that she has no plans of taking it easy on him. Seok anxiously expresses his gratitude for her thoughtfulness, and when it pertains to a distinctive talent he possesses, he has no desire to employ it against Sangha. Sangha then inhales deeply as she collects her mana, prepared to unleash chaos on Seok. As soon as she is prepared, he sprints towards Seok. Yet to her greatest astonishment, Seok springs upwards to evade her blow. Sangha is unable to comprehend the recent occurrence, as Seok essentially evaded a bolt of lightning merely by leaping. Conversely, Seok is captivated by her proficiency, as she effectively transformed the blade and its grip into magnets by passing an electric current through them. In accomplishing this, she augmented the magnetic attraction with the energy required to wield the sword, ultimately converting it into a railgun. Seok informs Sangha that she has excelled thus far, but conveys that she is overlooking one crucial aspect. He informs her that she was overly concentrated on merely striking swiftly. Essentially, her error was that to enhance the velocity of the unsheathed blade, she constructed a magnetic track in the void. Seok informs her that regardless of how swift and formidable it may be, there isn't a fool who would endure an assault that is clearly visible. Sangha remains convinced that Seok is merely a coincidence and advises him not to become overconfident, because she can conquer individuals like him without even employing the aforementioned method. She rushes towards Seok utilizing an alternative technique, albeit at a reduced speed. Seok swiftly sprints by, inquiring of Sangha whether she is genuinely unremarkable, as he has essentially evaded her quickest maneuver, yet she is attempting to strike him with something considerably more sluggish. Striving to avoid defeat against Seok, Sangha deploys a formidable method to fracture the earth, and Seok soon discerns that the girl is exerting herself to the utmost. Seok comprehends that the girl will be devastated if she persists in that manner. Seok then resolves to conclude the skirmish, stating that they have enjoyed sufficient amusement. He playfully prods her, instructing her to lift her left hand if what he is about to inflict upon her causes pain. Before Sangha has a chance to respond, Seok reaches her and delivers a blow to her abdomen, ultimately disturbing her internal organs. As she continues to grapple with what is unfolding, Seok concludes the battle with another blow that propels her soaring into the far reaches. Sangha is eliminated, astonishing all as they had never anticipated Seok to surpass the leading scholar of the institution. Seok pivots to exit the platform, but suddenly observes that Sangha is elevating her left hand. Seok recalls the quip he made when he instructed her to lift her left hand if she felt pain, and he is taken aback that she genuinely raised her hand. Prior to Seok's departure, the official receives a crucial notification, and he promptly declares that the competition timetable has been revised. He instructs Seok to pause briefly, leaving Seok utterly perplexed as the battle ought to have concluded by now. The official subsequently declares a startling revelation, disclosing that Seok and a current contender will engage in a unique match, leaving the audience astounded. It appears that the engaged tracker has already been revealed to the spectators on the display that is exclusively accessible to them. The whole assembly erupts in excitement, and Seok deduces that the hunter must possess remarkable talent. This pursuer turns out to be none other than Seon, and Seok contemplates whether she is present to evaluate his skills. Seon strides onto the platform wielding her colossal sword, informing Seok that she must engage him in combat as there is no alternative to validate his prowess. She presents herself to the guild she is employed by, while proposing that Seok has a suitable counterpart in her. She informs Seok that he is at liberty to decline the arrangement as it is too abrupt. Upon closer inspection, Seok can discern the reasons behind Seon's placement in the 10th position in the universe due to her poise and presence being truly remarkable. Despite understanding that he will face significant challenges managing Seon in his present form, Seok is unbothered and he gladly embraces the challenge. Seok proposes that they commence the match at once, astonishing the referee. Seok assertively discloses that he has not exhausted the majority of his energy, indicating that he is in quite good shape. As he aims to achieve the optimal outcome in the competition, Seok determines that confronting Seon would assist him in this endeavor. Seok subsequently seizes his spear, aiming to determine if he can enhance his worth. Half an hour into the confrontation, Seok remains upright yet he is already grappling with Seon's formidable strength. Seok is reluctant to accept that he is contending with a woman possessing such immense physical prowess. Nevertheless, he manages to drive Seon backward and he even acknowledges that his pace has diminished when, in contrast to the initial phases of the battle, Seok perceives opportunities while contending with Seon, yet his physique lacks the nimbleness required to capitalize on these chances. He is already perspiring and appears significantly fatigued after merely 30 minutes of facing Seon. Seon then playfully jests with him, expressing her anticipation for a solid warm-up for the first time in ages, yet she finds it hard to believe that Seok is already fatigued. Despite this, she remains impressed that Seok managed to endure for as long as he did, as she had anticipated he would give up within the initial 5 minutes. Seon subsequently rushes towards Seok, aiming to conclude the contest. As Seon rushes toward him, Seok begins to ponder intensely on how to respond. He becomes aware that he possesses no accumulated mana, and the mana present in the atmosphere is limited. Although he was hesitant to utilize his exceptional ability, he understands that he no longer has an option, and just as Seon is on the verge of approaching him, he initiates Paradox Flame. As a result, he manages to evade Seon's strike just in the nick of time. Seon is astonished because she is quite certain that she swung with such strength and precision that it ought to have been unfeasible for Seok to evade, yet he succeeded. She also observes a dark fire flickering upon his form, arousing her curiosity. Seok grins as he has just harnessed the energy he relies on most before descending back to the planet. Essentially, Paradox Flame does not incinerate substances in the same manner as conventional flames do, and the fire additionally consumes the intangible ideas he has identified as combustible material. Currently, Seok is unable to ignite notions with elevated ignition thresholds such as self-awareness or rationale. Him with one actionable notion to eradicate, which is exhaustion. Seok sprints towards Seon, and Seon notices that he has become even swifter. Seok unleashes a formidable blow that compels Seon to defend with great effort, and she is astonished that Seok managed to recuperate in such a brief brief period. The conflict between the two swiftly escalates to another intensity as they engage their weapons, producing a cacophony of clashes and flashes of light. Sion observes that the density of mana in the atmosphere continually varies between elevated and diminished levels, which is peculiar since the arena configurations remain unaltered. It appears that Paradox Flame emits mana while consuming substance. It is now up to Siok to utilize mana to spark the Paradox Flame, which subsequently consumes his weariness to produce additional mana. Leading to an infinite loop, the pair persist in battling one another, shattering the arena floor with their formidable strikes, and this is attributable to Siok's determination to persevere because he has become accustomed to a prolonged conflict. At one juncture, Sion inquires whether he believes he can maintain this endurance, and Siok reassures her that he is capable. Siok inquires whether she is fond of individuals who refuse to give up, to which Sion responds that she detests them. Similar to how charred trees produce ash as a remnant, it appears that Paradox Flame likewise leaves a residue. If everything is subsequently incinerated until solely the residue remains, Paradox Flame will ultimately vanish. Subsequent to 4 hours of fierce combat, Sion ultimately manages to bring Siok down to the floor, and Sion praises him for enduring for such an extended period. As soon as Sion is announced as the victor, she retrieves a large lollipop from her pocket and hands it to Siok, informing him that it is a token of appreciation for his diligent efforts. She also mentions that her business card accompanies the lollipop. Siok examines the card and Sion informs him that they will discuss the particulars at a later time. She encourages him to contact her in the interim, and upon the completion of the selection trials, Siok is summoned to the front to accept his accolade. A few days later, Siok utilizes his smartphone to review the card information. He becomes aware that the smartphone essentially offers all the information he requires. Siok is en route to meet Sion when he encounters an enormous individual who obstructs his path. Siok inquires about his identity, but he merely hands Siok his business card. Siok investigates and discovers that the individual's name is Yoon Seong Hyun. He is a partner seeker for the Taebaek Guild and, without delay, he prompts Siok to join his faction. Hyun guarantees Siok that he will rise to prominence if he opts to come and acquire experience under his guidance. Siok gazes into Hyun's eyes and understands that he is not being deceitful, yet simultaneously he recalls that he has prior commitments with Sion, preventing him from providing Hyun with a response immediately. Siok serenely informs Hyun that he will need to contemplate. However, Hyun bursts into laughter, declaring that he has no desire to receive an answer immediately. At that moment, he seizes Siok by the shoulder and leans in closer, urging him to carefully consider his response. After executing this absurd maneuver, he departs, informing Siok that they will encounter each other again. Nevertheless, Siok promptly deduces that Taebaek does not fit into his scheme. Siok then places a call to Sion, inquiring about the location where he should rendezvous with her. Sion instructs him to visit a location referred to as the Hut, situated on the upper level of the Hunter Association structure. Shortly thereafter, Siok reaches the cabin that seems to be a coffee house. Upon arrival, Sion beckons him to her table. Noticing Siok's response, the woman inquires if anything is amiss. Siok discloses that a formidable individual known as Hyun attempted to enlist him. Sion is astonished that Hyun expressed interest in Siok, and she informs him that the other guilds would not dare to extend another proposal. Siok inquires of Sion whether this is relevant to Janabi as well. Sion subsequently discloses an astonishing truth, informing Siok that she has no desire to enlist him, prompting Siok to inquire why she wishes to encounter him. Sion informs Siok that she prefers him to operate as an independent contractor without any association to a guild. Sion informs Siok that Hyun would probably have extended a junior role to him. Siok is perplexed by this and inquires of Sion what she signifies by a junior role and a partner seeker. As Siok does not hail from the Hunter Academy, Sion clarifies that the classifications for hunters affiliated with a guild are typically categorized into 3 tiers. These consist of novices, veterans, and associates. Underclassmen and upperclassmen are part of teams guided by partner hunters, thus they are fundamentally personnel receiving a salary or compensation. Nevertheless, partner hunters possess stakes in the guild rather than receiving a wage, and they partake in the net earnings generated by the guild. In straightforward language, they could be regarded as entrepreneurs. Evidently, the individual who initially founded the guilds utilized legal practices as a blueprint. It appears that one does not have to be affiliated with a guild or progress through the junior and senior levels to become a partner hunter. Siak ultimately comprehends all that Sion is conveying. Essentially, if he gains notoriety and attains remarkable accomplishments, the prominent guilds will inevitably pursue him. Sion affirms this and she cheerfully hands Siak a sweet, leaving the guy puzzled as to why her eccentric self is offering him a treat. Siak subsequently cautions Sion that he lacks any affiliations or resources, making it challenging for him to secure legitimate requests. Sion informs Siak that she intends to assist him with this matter at no cost. Siak is taken aback, yet concurrently comprehends why Sion would go to such extremes to assist him. Sion conveys to Siak that she merely wishes for him to recall in the future that there existed a guild named Janabi that supported him during his obscurity. In essence, Sion is aiding Siak so that he may feel indebted to her. Sion subsequently hands Siak an envelope, informing him that it is his prerogative to undertake the mission contained within or to decline it. Siak inquires about its nature, and she discloses that it is an appeal from Inchin City. Supposedly, there exists a location known as Jayadongo Island, where a deterioration zone emerged 2 years prior following an unsuccessful endeavor to eradicate a corrosion fissure. Siak inquires whether it is his duty to eliminate the fissure, but Sion informs him that his responsibility is to oversee the island, and if any further deterioration rifts emerge, he is to manage them. The operation is set to commence in a month's duration, and Siak will receive a payment of 5 million in advance, along with a further 15 million contingent upon the mission's success. Siak informs Sion that the compensation is unappealing, given that the position is considerably hazardous. Sion advises Siak to enhance his strength and achieve notoriety, thereby attracting greater financial offers for his expertise. Sion subsequently inquires about his choice, and exactly as anticipated, he accepts the appeal. Subsequently, Sion contacts her superior to inform him about how utterly irrational Siak is. Her supervisor inquires about his identity, to which she clarifies that he is a non-combatant who successfully navigated the selection tests using only his physical prowess. The supervisor doesn't perceive this as particularly extraordinary, yet Sion informs her that Siak managed to endure nearly 4 hours against her. Still, the supervisor maintains that Siak's extended endurance was due to Sion not taking him seriously. Sion then reminds her superior that she is an experienced hunter with a decade of expertise, all of which has been forged in the crucible of perilous environments. She notes that under typical circumstances, she should be able to play with Siak, but he certainly challenged her by lasting for 4 hours. Sion acknowledges just how remarkable Siak is, stating that she may never encounter another creature like him again. Her supervisor is weary of listening to her rave about Siak and inquires whether the task she assigned to Siak necessitated hunters with previous mission expertise. The individual is concerned that Siak may struggle to handle experienced hunters despite his considerable talent. Sion then informs her supervisor not to be concerned, as she has already matched Siak with a dependable individual, Sangha. The supervisor opts to rely on Sion's insight, as she is the intellect behind the endeavor in the guild. The supervisor subsequently inquires of Sion her thoughts on what Siak might be like when he attains her position, and Sion assured her superior that Siak would also be capable of defeating him. A month prior, Siak had received a directive for a lance end, a concoction in his flat. The concoction is a brew that seekers utilize in critical situations, and it comprises concentrated mana, which is incredibly beneficial when mana is urgently required. In terms of managing mana, it resembles sipping water from a filtration system. One can manipulate mana in the environment, accumulate it within the body, and even utilize it when required. The potion in his grasp enables him to accomplish this in a brief span of time. Nonetheless, Siak utilizes mana in a distinct manner compared to others, as he bypasses the accumulation phase and directly draws upon and employs the mana from the environment. The benefit of this is that there are no restrictions, as Siak harnesses the mana present in the atmosphere. Furthermore, during the absorption and release of mana, the mana pathways that the mana traverses progressively fortify, enabling the utilization of greater amounts of mana. Nevertheless, the sole drawback to this is that until the mana pathways expand, the quantity Siak can manage is limited, which hinders the ability to generate a powerful output in a brief period. Seok then resolves to utilize a portion of it, as there is no time to squander. He is certain that he would have improved with his new physique by the time he has trained it for a month. Currently, the hunters assemble to have their identities confirmed, authenticated prior to their entry onto the island. After Seok's identity is validated, the official informs him that he is assigned to Team 8. Seok aligns with the remainder of the team and remains silent while they all chatter incessantly like parrots. At that moment, he perceives someone uttering his name, and as he gazes upward, he recognizes that it is Sanga. She is clad in a sleeveless top and a mark traverses her shoulder. It becomes apparent that they are part of the same team, and Sanga proposes that they collaborate on the assignment. Seok inquires why he should consent to partner with her, and she evokes in him the notion that he possesses greater strength than she does. Consequently, she is convinced that she can gain insights from Seok, who playfully mocks her, claiming that his shoulder is on the verge of dislocating from overwhelming embarrassment. Sanga's incapacity to appreciate humor resurfaces when she inquires if Seok frequently dislocates his shoulders. Seok recalls precisely how she audaciously raised her hand during their competition, highlighting her complete deficiency in comedic appreciation. Shortly thereafter, the team gathers, and the officer updates them on the mission's goal. Given that they have fresh hunters in their midst, notably Seok, he notes that corrosion rifts are categorized into Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, and unclassified. The nearer a rift is to Class 1, the more perilous it becomes. He further states that the initial corrosion rift to emerge in a particular region is assigned the supplementary designation Alpha. It appears that the present site of the Alpha corrosion fissure on the island is the church situated in the northern region. Nonetheless, he informs them that the corrosion remains unclassified. Given that corrosion intensifies with time, the official advises them to maintain their distance from the fissure. He informs them that their objective is to monitor the region to detect and eradicate any further corrosion fissures that may have emerged. A bewildered leader in the team is astonished that they are undertaking a removal assignment with a novice in their midst. Before Seok becomes aware, he notices that the whole team is behaving strangely towards him due to his perceived status as a newcomer. Prior to their departure, they are notified that the Offshore Operations Center is operational, and they may reach out for assistance if required. With this, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter are dispatched with a wave of fortune. Upon reaching the isle, the experienced hunters begin to devise a strategy. However, Seok interjects, proposing that they establish a headquarters at Huajisa Temple to facilitate their operations from that location. He indicates the temple's position on the map. However, the experienced hunters are incredulous that they are receiving guidance from an utter novice. Furthermore, they are curious about his reasons for visiting the temple, to which Seok clarifies that from the temple one can observe their target zone. Additionally, they can view the entire landscape directly from the summit. He points out that the ancient temple structure is also accessible, making it a suitable option for accommodation, which is essentially the most logical course of action they must take. The experienced trackers promptly begin shouting at him, conveying that there are numerous alternative locations where they can reside. One even inquires what their plan is when encircled after unnecessarily ascending a peak. Seok reminds them that they are not battling legions of foes, so it is impossible for them to be surrounded. Despite Seok's attempts to persuade them, the hunters inform him that they have no obligation to adhere to his commands, given his significant lack of experience. Seok is taken aback to realize that there are also fools on Earth, mirroring those in the alternate realm. As they lack any desire to accompany him, Seok proposes that they part ways. Seok takes action and races toward the sanctuary, with Sangha trailing behind him. Unexpectedly, the yellow-headed individual from before is also trailing them, causing Seok to ponder the reason behind the man's pursuit. Seok calls out to the individual named Kim Minj, inquiring why he is trailing behind them. Minj takes pride in monitoring them closely, claiming it's necessary since they are newcomers. Seok expresses gratitude to Minj for his thoughtfulness, as he is astonished that there's at least one commendable individual in the team. Abruptly, Seok comes to an entire stop, instructing the other two to cease as well. He asks them to hush and encourages Minj to glance behind the concealment. Much to his astonishment, there are creatures lurking in the path. He promptly proposes that they choose an alternate route since there are no fewer than 50 creatures ahead of them. Seok then inquires about Minj's distinctive ability. This query perplexes Minj, as he is reluctant to accept that Seok intends to confront the monsters. Seok inquires whether it is not customary for a hunter to confront a beast, repeating the question and probing him about his distinctive ability. Minj responds that it is impressive, and he inquires which ability he feels most assured about, to which Minj discloses that it is the fireball. Seok is delighted to learn this and informs Minj that he will launch an assault on the creatures at his cue. Minj expresses his opposition to this, arguing that the entire situation is foolhardy since there are only 3 of them facing off against 50. He further asserts that it is their inaugural assignment and the prudent course of action is to communicate with the other hunters while they still have the opportunity. Seok discreetly responds that the hunters will not make it on schedule, since in contrast to them who left straight from Hojisa Temple, the remaining hunters are presently exploring the shoreline. Seok states that it is imprudent to summon the other hunters, as there is no assurance that those who receive the broadcast will actually arrive. Furthermore, the creatures could pose a danger to the remaining hunters if they disperse during the wait. Deep inside, Minj realizes that Seok is correct, as the other hunters may not arrive promptly due to a prior altercation that day. Seok, despite the seemingly unfavorable circumstances, advises them that their best course of action is to execute a stealthy ambush. As time is slipping away, Seok begins to sketch the strategy in the sand. He informs Minj that he will initiate the assault on the center with a fireball while he defends the flanks. From the strategy Seok is devising, Minj is utterly astonished as he cannot fathom how Seok is foreseeing every eventuality as though he is already accustomed to situations of this nature. After Seok concludes his explanation, Minj springs into motion and he strikes the creatures with a fireball. This results in a massive detonation engulfing the monsters that are impacted. Minj withdraws, indicating that it will require some time before he can unleash another fireball. Seok advances to maintain the offensive and instructs Minj to launch another fireball as soon as it is prepared. Minj recognizes the directive. Seok confronts the adversaries impervious to the flames, slicing through them effortlessly. Being someone who values efficiency in any task, he has consistently held the belief in delegating responsibilities. He intends to confront the creatures until the subsequent fireball is prepared, but he is well aware that he cannot fend off all of them alone. This fundamentally underscores the necessity for them to allocate responsibilities. Any creature that evades Seok's blow is subdued by Sangha, who is positioned in the rear. Shortly thereafter, Minj informs Seok that he is prepared to cast another fireball and Seok promptly moves aside, affording Minj the opportunity to deliver another crushing strike against the foes. Before long, they have eliminated the adversary's end. Seok continues to praise them for a task accomplished successfully, when Minj brandishes a firearm, astonishing Seok. Prior to the possibility of a cardiac event, Minj implores them to move aside, and Seok exhales in relief, as he had already feared that Minj was on the verge of targeting him. Seok subsequently embeds a microchip into a lifeless creature, disclosing that upon the completion of the operation and the area being secured, the scrap merchant he has an agreement with will arrive to retrieve the carcasses. Seok is completely unaware of what the man refers to as a junk dealer, and Minj discloses that it is challenging for them to retrieve the byproducts from the bodies themselves due to their considerable weight. Labeling them with microchips grants the scrap merchants the privilege to approach once the operation concludes to retrieve anything of worth. Once they have gathered all items, evaluate them, market them, and subsequently divide the earnings. The scrap merchants receive their commission according to the agreement, while the remainder is returned to the individual who inserted the chip. Seok inquires of Minj whether he can rely on the scrap merchants, to which he responds that this underscores the necessity of locating a reputable junk dealer to establish a contract with. Minj subsequently praises Seok, expressing admiration for his remarkable abilities, as he had never anticipated that the 3 of them could confront the 50 creatures. Abruptly, Seok's heightened instincts alert him that something is amiss. Without a moment's pause, he seizes Minj and plunges ahead to evade an unexpected assault from a colossal creature that has been pursuing them. Fortunately, Minj emerges unscathed, departing, causing him to inquire what had just assaulted them. Seok examines the creature more intently and observes that it appears to be a type of intermediate-level antagonist. Seok is astonished by the emergence of the creature, departing him to ponder whether the creature is the leader of the other beings they have merely vanquished. Seok can also perceive that it is no trivial matter, as the quantity of mana it is emitting is on an entirely different scale compared to the foes they recently battled. Without a moment's pause, he instructs the pair to keep their distance while he confronts the creature. Minj and Sangha are convinced that they ought to assist by employing a pincer maneuver, but Seok yells at them to retreat or they might end up returning home in a coffin. The gravity in Seok's tone instantly prompts the two to step back. Beneath the surface, Siak has already assessed the circumstances, realizing that it would be more advantageous for him to confront the creature on his own. With no one obstructing his path, he deduces that he can simply employ paradox to tackle the beast. As soon as Siak is prepared, he provokes the creature, challenging it to confront him. Shortly thereafter, Minj inquires of Sanga whether they will not assist Siak, as he appears to be in distress. Sanga informs him that this is unnecessary, as it may give the impression that Siak is facing difficulties. Yet he hasn't been struck a single time since the bout commenced. Moreover, the assaults that Siak is evading effortlessly are challenges she would have found difficult to overcome. Siak is essentially evading while striking simultaneously. Sanga also observes that whenever Siak's spear strikes, a dark flame emerges each time, prompting Sanga to ponder its significance. The greater the flame emission, the slower the creature becomes. Initially, it seemed that Siak was battling, but it ultimately reveals that he is essentially playing with the creature. Sanga is utterly astonished as she refuses to accept that Siak is a novice tracker similar to herself. Once Siak has finished playing with the creature, he performs an unexpected act by hurling his spear skyward. As the beast races towards him at maximum velocity, Sanga panics, convinced that the creature is about to bring him down. Yet just as the creature is on the verge of approaching Siak, it is obliterated by the projectile descending from overhead. Siak didn't so much as blink, demonstrating the degree of assurance he possesses in his abilities. He praises the creature for its ability to continue moving despite having expended all of its energy. Siak subsequently determines that it is time to eliminate the creature. Minya is utterly inundated by what he has just observed, since it is inconceivable that Siak effortlessly defeated such a formidable beast. Once Siak has finished vanquishing the creature, he inquires Minya whether it is typical for a creature of such power to manifest on the island. Minya informs him that he too has contemplated the same question, since the creature is not even the epicenter of the corruption rift. Minya suggests that it might have been feasible considering they encountered a rift of at least level 3. At this moment, it became apparent to Siak that during the mission debriefing, he had learned that the Alpha Corrosion Rift was not categorized. Given this situation, Siak informs the two that the primary corrosion fissure on the island has escalated to level 3. Sanga is hesitant to accept this due to the information provided in the briefing, but Siak encourages her to consider it logically. He explains that it would be impossible to clarify the circumstances if the corrosion isn't classified as grade 3. Minya panics upon hearing this, as the distinction between an unclassified rift and a grade 3 is as stark as day and night. Minya discloses that if this holds true, the hunters are in jeopardy and they may not return unscathed. Minya promptly proposes that they rescue the remaining hunters, as with Siak's expertise, they stand a chance. Nonetheless, Siak promptly declines the proposal, stating his disinterest. Minya inquires about his reasoning for dismissing the request, and he discloses that he cannot possibly rescue all the hunters on the island single-handedly. He reiterates to Minya that he is merely human and has his own constraints. He reminds both of them that their objective is not to rescue endangered hunters, but to detect and eradicate any newly emerged corrosion rifts. Further, he informs them that it is evident not everyone will endure, which is a fundamental aspect of the job description. Sanga subsequently inquires of Siak what he intends to do if he finds himself in the hunter's predicament. Siak fails to comprehend her perspective, and she informs him that he would have implored for rescue and, in a firm tone, Siak informs them that he is not declining this due to a lack of comprehension regarding human feelings. He clarifies that his focus is solely on the result, for in this realm there are fatalities that are inevitable. He informs them that when confronted with fatalities of this nature, it is typical for an individual to simply perish. Siak advises them to refrain from acting on feelings, as such a mindset will not enable them to endure in a harsh reality. Subsequently that evening, they arrive at the sanctuary and, after exploring the temple, Siak informs the two that the structure is secure. Minya subsequently remarks that it is beneficial for them to observe the positions of the other hunters owing to their illumination. Nevertheless, Siak is not fully in favor of this, as utilizing lights serves as a blatant beckoning for the adversary. He understands that the creatures will manage typical beasts, yet he fears that a more formidable monster, akin to the previous one, may emerge once more. Siak then resolves to issue a cautionary notice to the hunters, indicating that there is a chance the rift has escalated to a grade 3. He insists they avoid utilizing lights carelessly, as it could jeopardize their safety. Siak subsequently inquires with Minya whether the other creatures will see cease to exist if the heart of the rift is obliterated, to which Minya affirms. He informs Siak that, in the absence of the energy emanating from the rift, the tainted region will dissipate. As soon as Siak perceives this, he determines that his objective is straightforward: to eliminate the corrosion rift. Subsequently that evening, as soon as the pair has fallen asleep, Siak gets ready to venture outside. Prior to his departure, he sets down a warning apparatus that will activate if a creature draws near, and Siak is convinced that he ought to be able to leave and return without any concerns regarding them. While navigating the woodland, Siak feels relieved that he verified the position of the Alpha Corrosion Rift during the debriefing. Siak is confident that matters will unfold smoothly, yet he ultimately curses it as he encounters yet another formidable boss creature that appears even more terrifying than the one he battled previously. Previously in the Hunter Association's command center, there was a state of panic as they had lost contact with several hunters from Team 5, and it is feared that they are deceased. As if this weren't sufficient, there are accounts indicating that the creatures are advancing in a coordinated manner, and there is already a verified fatality in Team 3. The team leader shouts in exasperation, questioning what the issue is, as the combatants are meant to be examining an unidentified corrosion rift. In a state of alarm, the team leader proclaims a crisis, informing the superiors that reinforcements will be essential. He insists that they initiate the emergency communication system and issue an immediate appeal for assistance to all hunters in the area. They are engaged in this endeavor when he receives word that an individual is nearing the Alpha Corrosion Rift. The team leader panics upon hearing this and instructs his subordinates to reach out to the person and urge them to cease. One of the officials receives the update that the pursuer approaching the Alpha Corrosion is Siak from Team 8. The team supervisor instructs them to link to Siak's terminal to promptly verify that he is still alive. The team leader is astonished that Siak is the first to grasp the circumstances, as a rift enhancement is an extraordinary occurrence. He deduces that since Siak is the sole individual approaching the Alpha Corrosion, it essentially indicates that he possesses the only solution. When they eventually reach out to Siak, he is already confronting the fearsome creature he encountered. Siak shouts at those in the control room, expressing disbelief at their insanity for not diligently conducting an inquiry to verify whether the rift is genuinely an unidentified corrosion. Siak ensures to label them with various epithets, prompting the authorities to contemplate silencing him. As he flees from the creature, Siak realizes that his paradox flame lacks the necessary power to vanquish the monster. This signifies that he must diminish the creature's vitality using Paradox Flame and subsequently eliminate it with his spear. Nevertheless, Siak is encountering an issue as he has already extracted an excessive amount of mana from the island while confronting the mid-tier adversary from before. This has rendered his Paradox Flame somewhat feeble, and since he is unable to depart from the island, Siak resolves to seek a location where he can harness more mana. Following several minutes of darting about, he ultimately discovers what he has been seeking, which is the Alpha Rift. Without a moment's pause, Siak plunges into the chasm while mocking the creature, urging it to continue. Up as there is something he must verify, return. In the Situation Room, they are astounded when Siak's GPS signal abruptly disappears, and they discover that he has ventured into the Alpha Corrosion Abyss. Upon entering the chasm, Siak conveys his astonishment at the remarkable cleanliness of the fissure. Moreover, it is considerably large, and Siak ponders the extent of the Grade 1 and Grade 2 rifts, wondering how vast they will be if the unclassified one is this immense. At that moment, the formidable adversary arrives, and Siak realizes that it is time to conclude their confrontation. Siak has consistently encountered a single predicament with Paradox Flame, and this is the reality that it extends to all sentient creatures except for him. The flame has the ability to eliminate a companion, and at times, it escalates to a point where he can no longer manage it. This is the sole drawback that the ability possesses. However, if he is battling solo, it is not particularly a drawback since he has the freedom to combat in any manner he chooses. Siak brandishes his armament at the beast, releasing a massive surge of fire upon it, simultaneously assimilating mana throughout every part of his physique. This expands his network of channels, enhancing his strength even further. And an intense inhalation of this reveals to Siak what he has been lacking until now: merely. Subsequently, the creature howls, and Seok swiftly discerns its intentions. Before long, additional creatures arrive at the location, and Seok isn't taken aback since he realizes the beast had summoned reinforcements with its irritating roar. Nevertheless, Seok informs the formidable adversary that a numerical contest is futile. Seok conjures a shield of fire encircling himself, vanquishing the creatures, while informing them that he is already more powerful than he was previously, even though he does not possess the same strength as he did in the alternate realm. As per Minya, the nucleus of the rift will house the mightiest creature within it. Abruptly, Seok is ambushed from the rear by a creature capable of speech. However, he successfully evades the strike. As he glances back, he encounters a hideous creature gazing at him. Seok is taken aback by the creature's intelligence, as it possesses the ability to speak and patiently holds off its revelation until his paradox flame extinguishes. Upon a more thorough inspection, he discerns that the entity before him is the essence of the rift. With his present level of strength, Seok is confident that a 4-hit combination is achievable for him, and without any reluctance, he takes action. He hurls his javelin at the creature, but it deflects it with its own weapon. Nevertheless, the pressure exerted by the spear continues to push down on the sword, and Seok triggers an ability known as Dual Orbit Spear. Abruptly, the lance emits a tremendous energy surge that shatters the creature's spear before penetrating its form, unleashing a catastrophic explosion to obliterate the creature's form. It appears that the dual orbit spear creates a cerulean path that is produced in accordance with the course of his assault. This arc emulates the initial blow, yet reiterates it 4 times. Essentially, it is a method that replicates 4 successive strikes. And if the azure path strikes slightly delayed, it executes a challenging 2-phase spear maneuver that is exceptionally hard to evade. At this moment, the beast is already vaulting towards Seok, poised to bring him down. Nonetheless, this proves to be its error, as the spear approaches at the opportune moment. Seok seizes the spear, executing a formidable thrust to pierce the creature, prior to executing the decisive blow that breaks apart the adversary's physique. Unexpectedly, following the vanquishment of the creature, it simply does not vanish as Juk receives a container. In the interim, individuals in the command center were still panicking, convinced that it was finished as the creatures continued to proliferate. The group observes in dread, uttering that solely a miracle can rescue them, as all the hunters are destined to be eradicated due to their refusal to grant his plea for backup. Unexpectedly, the team captain receives word that Seok, who ventured into the chasm, has just transmitted a message. The team captain insists on obtaining the specifics of the operation, and they exhibit it on the primary display. To their astonishment, Seok reveals that the alpha deterioration has been addressed. As Seok mentioned, they began to receive indications that the fracture had vanished, and all creatures had begun to fade away. The team leader is astonished upon hearing this, as it is nothing short of a miracle, just as he had hoped for. Yet he ponders how Seok accomplished it. Instance before, Sangha and Minj had been encircled by a swarm of creatures. With Seok absent, Minj inquires of Sangha whether there is any possibility that they will manage to survive. Sangha understands that the fellow has reached his threshold, and even she is uncertain about how much longer she can cling on as well. One of the creatures lunges towards them, and Sangha readies to confront, but comes to understand a harsh reality. She recognizes that she has reached her threshold, and her legs cannot even budge. Sangha shuts her eyes while she anticipates the arrival of death. In an unexpected twist, Seok triumphed over the core at that precise instant, causing the creatures to begin vanishing. Subsequently, Seok reaches the gathering location for the island hunters and discovers that numerous individuals are hurt. He concludes that the corrosive beings unleashed chaos during his absence. The remaining hunters who had previously been unwilling to collaborate with Seok have now received the information that he single-handedly closed the rift. They are all astonished and, in astonishment, as a grade 3 rift is not an undertaking that a novice can simply confront. Seok soon locates his companions and Minj conveys his astonishment that Seok tackled the chasm entirely on his own. Seok subsequently informs Minj that his heart desired to act appropriately. Seok had previously resolved to embrace the role of the hero since circumstances had already unfolded favorably. They are still deliberating on this when a representative arrives, informing Seok that he is Bayon Jongti and that he hails from the Korea Operating Corporation. It seems he serves as the 3rd branch manager for the northern Incheon region. Bayon informs Seok that the mayor wishes to meet with him. Shortly afterward, Seok reaches the mayor's office amidst torrential downpour. Yet Seok is unconcerned as he seeks to re-establish the terms of his compensation. Upon reaching the structure, he is greeted by Lee Piljai, the communications and liaison representative. As they proceed towards the mayor's office, Piljai informs Seok that the mayor has been eagerly anticipating the meeting, disclosing that he was taken aback upon receiving the report from the island. It appears that the mayor annulled all of his appointments following the receipt of the report, and Seok jestingly chides him, remarking that he ought to have refrained from doing so since he accomplished nothing noteworthy. Piljai advises Seok against making that statement, as a novice hunter single-handedly obliterating a grade 3 corrosion rift hasn't occurred since the era of the very first hunter. Seok is astonished that someone had accomplished this previously, and is convinced that the individual must be the genuine article. Shortly thereafter, they reach the mayor's office. The mayor Park Jin greets Seok, while concurrently expressing remorse for confronting him in such dreadful conditions. Jin subsequently instructs Seok to take a seat while requesting Piljai to fetch them coffee. When they find themselves alone, Jin praises him, expressing that he has rendered an exceptional service to the nation. He concedes that the isle was quite a hassle to manage due to their restricted budget, making it challenging to engage a costly guild. Seok responds that he is fairly certain the individual is pleased that the problem has been addressed, as he managed to resolve it at a comparably low expense. Jin verifies this while inquiring of Seok whether it is indeed his inaugural assignment, to which Seok responds affirmatively. The mayor rises enthusiastically, expressing his pride in Seok for taking his initial steps in Incheon. He begins to discuss how Korea stands as the most secure nation globally, departing Seok to ponder what has abruptly changed with the individual. The mayor goes on to state that Incheon is one of the crucial locations in the nation due to its status as a commercial hub. Furthermore, the initiative for the free economic zone is drawing the attention of international investors. In reality, the influx has been so considerable that selecting a single candidate has proven challenging. The mayor informs Seok that substantial financial resources are flowing into Incheon's global urban areas. The mayor subsequently informs Seok that he will extend all the support possible to facilitate Seok's endeavors as a hunter. As they journey to the mayor's office, Baeon inquired of Seok about his motivation for pursuing the path of a hunter. Seok draws a comparison, stating that someone must consistently be present to unclog the obstructed toilet. Upon listening to this, Baeon expresses to Seok that he is quite certain he will attain fame and immense popularity. He is also aware that businesses will begin to implore him to film advertisements for them, and he could even be approached for renowned television programs. Seok understands that Baeon is concerned about the possibility of his transformation due to notoriety, and Baeon acknowledges this apprehension. He states that numerous instances exist of talented hunters who become enamored with acclaim and recognition, leading them to neglect their responsibilities. He claims this is not surprising as it is inherent. He further states that the sole secure location is Korea, referred to as the final haven remaining on the planet. Baeon informs him that his achievements are remarkable, signifying that numerous individuals will be observing him with keen interest. Baeon expresses to Seok his desire to remain a beacon of optimism. Now that Seok is in the mayor's office, Seok understands that the mayor is essentially presenting everything directly without even considering the nuances. Nevertheless, he is aware that the mayor will shortly discover that he is not an individual who can be easily influenced by such matters. Seok has endured for a considerable time, experiencing numerous trials, rendering all of these insignificant to him. Seok subsequently inquires with the mayor if there is anything he desires from him, as there is no possibility he will endorse him without compensation. Seok takes the initiative, informing the mayor that he is quite convinced he is striving to enhance his approval ratings for the upcoming re-election. The mayor is astonished by Seok's extensive knowledge, and Seok points out that one can discover everything on their mobile device. The mayor is astonished by the extent of Seok's knowledge, and he inquires whether he hadn't actually required authorization from the municipal office. It appears that the mayor is indeed correct, as he requires the mayor's consent to engage in missions due to his novice status. Seok comes to the realization that if the mayor presents it effectively, he could assert that Seok was a gifted individual he uncovered in Incheon. The mayor subsequently informs Seok that he has consistently nurtured connections with numerous international and local enterprises. He gently strikes the coffee package on the table, stating that the actress featured in the advertisement for the coffee brand would soon see her contract expire. He suspects that they are intended to substitute her image with Seok's likeness. He is on the verge of persisting with his nonsense when Seok accidentally lets the coffee cup slip, inquiring with the mayor if he considers him to be of little worth. The mayor is perplexed by this, and Seok notes that given the current state of affairs globally, it seems the world requires an individual capable of transforming the dismal ambience. He informs the mayor that if he persists in his role as a tracker, it signifies that he can effortlessly obtain all that the mayor has pledged to him. Seok stands to depart while the mayor attempts to persuade him, claiming he can offer him secure and lucrative contracts. Seok departs, declaring that his proposals are worthless, and he can transfer them to his coffee blend prototype. In the meantime, an unusual individual is observed obtaining a briefing regarding the unsuccessful outcome of their experiment on the island, attributed to Seok's interference. They can obtain a segment from his selection trial game, and the peculiar individual becomes intrigued by the dark aura enveloping his figure. Since the inception of the evaluations, it appears that the commencement of each month is consistently when the rankings are refreshed, and the entire country is perpetually anticipating this. As per usual, everyone is eagerly anticipating to discover who will emerge as the top hunter. Although there are not numerous alterations in the standings, it serves as a source of amusement for the audience. Seon is likewise intrigued by the standings, as she wishes to ascertain whether Seok will be included. Ultimately, it proves to be remarkably distinct. Occupying the 10th position is Seon. 5th position is awarded to Kim Chahyun. Cha Yo-reum secured the 3rd position, while Young Tae Seok occupied the 2nd position. And regarding the top position, it appears to be none other than Seok. This eventually secured him a prominent press briefing where he is anticipated to respond to inquiries. The spotlight is on Seok as he is a newcomer, and he successfully navigated a grade 3 rift. Seok is beset with inquiries regarding how he managed to bridge the chasm, and following a barrage of questions, Seok ultimately inquires about one final question. The journalist inquires about his determination, and he guarantees them that he will exert his utmost effort. Subsequently, Seok is summoned by the association's leader, Moon, for an excursion. He escorts him to the site of Gonzo's former confinement. A substantial pit remains where Gonzo once was. And Moon informs him that what he is gazing at represents the destiny of numerous nations. Evidently, the majority of countries forfeited their governance abilities following the emergence of the corrosion rift. Nevertheless, South Korea emerged as a formidable force that adeptly safeguarded the nation while also achieving significant technological progress. He discloses that the aircraft they are aboard exemplifies the country's technological capabilities as it operates on mana and insulates against external sound. Seok inquires of Moon whether this is the fate of nations that were unable to manage the fissure, to which Moon affirms, disclosing that numerous capitals vanished following the emergence of the corrosion rifts. Moon proposes that they examine it more closely. As they approach the crater, he notes that there are 8 of the most perilous corrosion fissures globally, with the Gonzo Penitentiary being one of them. It appears that the Gonzo Penitentiary was established 13 years prior, expanding into the city without any indications or alerts. Although a few managed to endure, they were ultimately carried off as the whole region had transformed into a decay zone. Within a few days, the whole city disappeared without a remnant. As they depart from the location, Moon informs Seok that the dynamics of power in the world have not shifted significantly, although the dominant forces have diminished. At his core, Seok feels a sense of gratitude for acquiring this knowledge, yet concurrently, he is perplexed about why he must be present at the location to grasp it. Moon subsequently discloses that Hyun from Taebik visited him several days prior, and it seems that he is furious that Seok is not becoming a member of his guild. Indeed, he inquired about Seok's location. However, Moon reassures Seok that he did not disclose anything, as it is clearly sensitive information. Moon explains to Seok that the Taebik Guild adheres to a philosophy centered on the survival of the strongest, and should Seok fail to comply with their demands, they may resort to coercion. Seok struggles to fathom that they would go that far, yet concurrently, he is concerned about his inability to confront Hyun at this time. Moon subsequently remarks that Seok resembles an individual disinterested in associating with any organization, allowing him to pursue his activities according to his own preferences, to which Seok agrees. Moon informs Seok that he must elevate his criteria if he wishes to prevent Taebok from pursuing him. He points out that there is a method to achieve this, one of which involves accepting assignments from the association president. As soon as Seok perceives this, he is not taken aback since he is already aware that there is an underlying reason for it all. Seok promptly inquires of the man what he desires, as he is quite convinced that he will not be offering him tasks without compensation. Moon informs Seok that his sole desire is for him to recall that he provided assistance. He subsequently hands him an envelope instructing him to examine the contents. Seok is convinced that he has hit the jackpot, as it is a transaction from the president, which is quite favorable for establishing a reputation. Seok inquires of the man what his responsibilities entail, and the man discloses that he is tasked with guiding a freight vessel from Busan to Nanning City. He notes that transit is challenging due to the corrosion fissures emerging all around. Seok subsequently examines the inventory of items he is meant to accompany and discovers that they are all opulent possessions, including an automobile. Seok is astonished by this and conveys his disbelief at what individuals still regard as essential, while Moon informs him that everything on the list constitutes essentials for certain individuals. Moon anticipates that Seok will grasp this, yet Seok asserts he does not, as he fails to comprehend the necessity for such matters in a nation where the administration is already in disarray. Moon indicates that numerous nations may be disintegrating due to the divisions, yet this does not imply that global diplomacy has become irrelevant. Seok promptly understands that the objective is designed to uphold global relations. Given this situation, Seok unfastens his seatbelt and informs the man that he has no inclination toward the task. Moon is taken aback by this revelation and conveys to Seok that the South Korean government regards the mission with utmost seriousness. Despite this, Seok informs Moon that he has no desire to engage. Seok advises the elderly gentleman that it would be unwise for him to entangle himself in global affairs. The elderly gentleman is infuriated that Seok is declining the proposal, and he attempts to remind him that he is merely a novice hunter who recently made his debut. However, Seok remains indifferent as he discards the mission documents from the helicopter. Seok additionally opens the door, expressing gratitude to the elderly gentleman for the lift, but informs him that he will be swimming back to Seoul on his own. Without a moment's pause, Seok leaps from the helicopter and descends into the aquatic depths beneath, rendering the man utterly astonished. Subsequently, Seok appears at Incheon Airport and he nonchalantly emerges from the water. He encounters a dock worker and the two nonchalantly trade pleasantries as if it were trivial. Anticipating potential threats ahead, Seok resolves that his foremost priority is to fortify himself. He intends to accomplish this by undertaking the most challenging assignments, so he has the potential to become a prominent figure who would remain unaffected by anyone in the future. Seok scrolls through his smartphone and quickly discovers a task that appears to align with his desires. This is an operation to save abducted individuals on Tsushima Island, and the anticipated classification is Level 2. Seok subsequently inhales deeply, with the understanding that he will be occupied for an extended period. Evidently, on September 3rd, anglers from Jeoje Island and Tongyong ventured into the ocean, yet the waters were atypical due to the emergence of corrosive organisms that had taken residence on Tsushima Island, and abducted the fishermen as though pursuing them. In the account of a survivor who narrowly evaded capture, the seized fishermen remain alive. The objective necessitates that Seok travel to Tsushima Island to liberate the abducted captives and eradicate the decay fisher. Concerning the prize, it amounts to 55 million won, and Seok is aware that the entirety of the funds will belong to him if he undertakes the task independently. Furthermore, he will be regarded as a hero if he manages to accomplish it independently. Although it is a worthwhile endeavor, Seok recalls what they mentioned regarding marks and the beings inhabiting them. It is claimed that a Grade 3 corrosion fissure possesses the devastating capability of a tank. However, a Grade 2 corrosion chasm entity qualifies as a natural catastrophe magnitude. In the case of Grade 1, the entire nation would need to rally together in an effort to contain one solitary corrosion entity. He is aware that he managed to navigate the Grade 3 fissure due to paradox flame, yet he contemplates whether he can endure Grade 2 independently. To ensure his security, he concludes that he may require a capable individual. However, the challenge lies in locating someone willing to accept a civilian's appeal. He contemplates whether there truly is no one available, yet it suddenly occurs to him that there exists someone who can assist. Shortly thereafter, Siak and his companion, who is none other than Senga, who embarks on a vessel towards their intended location. Senga inquires when they will arrive at their location, and he responds that they possess approximately an hour. He encourages her to restore her energy prior to their arrival, as the confrontation is expected to be more challenging than before. While Siak is preoccupied with expressing all of this, Senga is increasingly intrigued by the metallic plate on his shoulder. She inquires about it since, judging by its appearance, it seems to be a special edition, prompting her to ponder how he acquired it. Siak is weary of listening to the girl chatter, and he is compelled to inform her that the scrap merchant he engaged was the one who presented it to him as a present. Senga is astonished by this revelation since the establishment she dealt with didn't provide her with anything of value. Siak playfully mocks her, asserting that the standards of anticipation vary since he is an emerging talent who managed a grade 3 corrosion fissure on his own. In contrast to her, who is merely a mediocre novice holding only the distinction of Academy valedictorian. Siak perceives the frosty demeanor on her visage and realizes that she feels unjustly treated by his remark, yet he seizes this opportunity to encourage her to fortify herself and gain recognition to prevent additional affronts. A few days prior, Siak had contacted Senga to express his need for a partner. Senga was initially reluctant due to their near-fatal experience in a grade 3 rift, and Siak is proposing that they tackle a level 2 rift. Siak manages to persuade her by inquiring whether she is keen on becoming more powerful. He guaranteed her that he could enhance her strength beyond her present capabilities. It appears that Senga possesses a personal motivation for her desire to become more resilient, and she would willingly plunge into the depths of hell if it ensures her empowerment. Shortly thereafter, the ship's alarm activates, cautioning them of an unknown entity in their path. Before long, they encounter 5 vessels. Siak is still endeavoring to determine their subsequent steps when he observes Senga hovering, leaving him astounded. Senga is astonished that Siak is unable to accomplish this, and she blushes with exhilaration as she has at last discovered something Siak is incapable of accomplishing. She bursts into laughter, mocking Siak for failing to accomplish this. With little effort, Senga is compelled to bear Siak on her shoulders. As they approach the vessels, Siak instructs Senga to manage the nearest ship. Senga inquires of him the reason, and he discloses that those at the rear seem to be more perilous than those nearer to them. Senga recognizes the directive. However, as she nears the vessel, she perceives a human silhouette. However, Siak instructs her to examine once more, as what she is observing is not of human origin. Siak confronts the vessel he intends to eliminate, and precisely as anticipated, he discovers altered individuals aboard the vessel. These beings have forfeited their humanity and have completely turned hostile. Senga descends onto the vessel abruptly, ultimately drawing focus to herself. The creatures assail, and Siak effortlessly eliminates the initial surge. With this, he understands that they are minor creatures. He anticipates Senga will also exit softly, yet to his astonishment, Senga is exerting her complete strength against the feeble creatures. Siak promptly shouts her name to warn her, informed her that she is expending excessive mana. He informs her that if she persists in that manner, she will deplete her mana swiftly. He advises her that for the present stage, only a minimal quantity of mana is required. And Senga recalls what Siak mentioned regarding instructing her to grow more resilient. Adhering to Siak's guidance, Senga diminishes the level of firepower she is deploying. Yet Siak still conveys to her that it remains excessive, given that the existence of the feeble is a misfortune. Senga has resolved that she will never be feeble again. As dismantling the adversaries, Senga assertively reaffirms her ambition to grow even more powerful. Shortly thereafter, Senga has finished eliminating the creatures, and she inquires of Siak whether it has concluded. Siak informs her that he has already attended to the other vessels. Senga hesitantly expresses her gratitude to Siak, conveying that she benefited greatly from the guidance he provided her. Siak playfully taunts her, stating that she needn't express her gratitude because the world is populated with individuals who wouldn't grasp the lesson even if it were presented to them on a silver platter. Senga confesses, stating that this is the inaugural instance someone has counseled her, leaving Siak astonished. He inquires about the education she received at the academy, and she discloses that because she grasped concepts rapidly, they neglected to instruct her on the basics. Siak then playfully mocks her, questioning whether she believes she will surpass him in strength if he persists in guiding her as he currently does. With tears glistening in her eyes, she confides in Siak that she has yet to surpass even a single instructor. Siak is astonished to witness the girl in such a poignant condition, and he nonchalantly informs her that there's no need for concern regarding this matter, as it will not occur with him, since he intends to ensure that she maintains her admiration for him throughout her entire life. As they prepare to plunge further, the mariners inform Siak and Sangha that they will stay vigilant in the event their assistance is required. Prior to embarking on their expedition, Siak informs Sangha that, as per the survivor's account, the captives are located at the sanctuary. Sangha informs Siak that there exist two sanctuaries on the island. They are the Gaijin Sanctuary and the Adazumi Sanctuary. Should they gaze into the horizon, Siak is convinced that the Gaijin Shrine ought to be their initial destination, while Sangha mentions they can reach it within a few hours by foot. Siak acknowledges this is not an obstacle. However, the challenge lies in the reality that upon their return, they will need to transport 15 captives as stated in the survivor's account. Moreover, Siak can perceive an ominous energy lurking beyond the mist, and he is certain that the rusting beings on the island will pursue them relentlessly. Siak continues to ponder an escape route when he notices a car in the distance, and suddenly everything falls into place. He inquires of Sangha whether she is a skilled driver, to which Sangha affirms positively. Shortly thereafter, Siak is pleading for his survival as a result of Sangha maneuvers the automobile as though it were her final day in existence. She playfully challenges Siak, urging him to seize control if he disapproves of her driving style. Siak advises her to disregard it, and he springs onto the roof of the automobile, prepared to confront the beasts that are already pursuing them. Siak brandishes an arrow pouch and tosses it towards the creatures. This eliminates a multitude of creatures, and by retracting it, it continues to perform identically. At that moment, Siak observes that creatures are already bounding toward them from the left, and he alerts Sangha. Sangha demonstrates precisely how reckless a motorist she is as she navigates in the most perilous manner to eliminate the creatures. Sangha steers the bus on two wheels to distance the beasts from them, and at this moment, Siak longs to be the one behind the wheel. As they traverse the desolate paths, the creatures remain steadfast on their course, pursuing them in the same manner that ants follow sweetness. Shortly thereafter, they reach their destination. Sangha refers to the creatures lurking behind them, yet Siak reassures her not to fret as he will take care of them. Sangha maneuvers the vehicle into the sanctuary, and Siak promptly releases the contradictory blaze to obstruct the sanctuary's threshold, devouring any creature that approaches. Shortly thereafter, they discover the captives in the location where they are bound. Sangha approaches them to present herself. Rather than rejoicing over their rescue, the captives begin to behave in the most peculiar manner. Tears stream down their cheeks as they implore Sangha to flee, and Sangha ponders why she is receiving a caution. Unbeknownst to her, a colossal samurai creature has materialized behind her, poised to strike her down. Fortunately for her, Siak manages to thwart the samurai's assault. Siak instructs Sangha to assist the survivors into the vehicle while he confronts the samurai. An intense conflict swiftly erupts between the samurai and Siak. The warrior appears imposing as he attempts to slice Siak down. Yet despite the disparity in stature, Siak remains undaunted. Abruptly, Sangha materializes unexpectedly and strikes the warrior with the automobile, tumbling him to the earth. With the warrior on the floor, Siak praises Sangha's creativity, but she simply instructs him to enter. Siak remains perched on the vehicle, while the captives are securely nestled inside. The voyage is progressing seamlessly until they comprehend that the creatures are anticipating them in the distance. Siak also observes that the samurai remains alive despite being struck by a vehicle, with a multitude of creatures ahead. Siak instructs Sangha to hand over her blade. Sangha is astonished to learn this, as requesting a warrior for their blade is a tremendous affront. Siak subsequently inquires which she favors more, her dignity or the rescue of the captives. Sangha lacks an alternative, but to relinquish her blade, and Siak seizes it, prepared to employ it. Unexpectedly, there exists an unusual gadget on his wrist, and although Siak was reluctant to employ it prematurely, he comes to the realization that he has no alternative at that moment. It appears that the glove was located within the container that was presented to him on the island following the defeat of the core. It wasn't an ordinary glove, for it had the ability to absorb mana from the surrounding environment. Upon Siak's initial encounter, he was convinced that it was intended to augment one's mana. Nevertheless, for Siak, it represented far more than that. It appears that the utmost mana retention capability of the glove is 5 minutes. Within this duration, he possesses the strength to rival that of Sion. As the creatures attempt to obstruct their route, Siak grips his spear and sword, primed to deliver a formidable assault. Siak unleashes his formidable onslaught against the creatures, dispatching them all in a single stroke. Sanga is engulfed in astonishment and incredulity, unable to comprehend the events that just unfolded before her. As the route is now unimpeded, Siak instructs Sanga to proceed to the harbor, without glancing back. As the expedition progresses, Siak is astonished to discover that there is no cessation to the tainted creatures. They relentlessly continue to pursue them. And Sanga advises Siak that it would be more advantageous for them to exit and confront the creatures since the vehicle has reached its capacity. Nonetheless, Siak instructs her to continue driving, and at that moment, they pass through an unusual boundary that, astonishingly, retains the creatures on the opposing side. All the creatures struggle to traverse the obstacle while the automobile glides away effortlessly. Sanga is rendered speechless, and she scans her surroundings in an attempt to discover the reason the creatures are abruptly pursuing them. She notices a gleaming emblem on the wall, causing her to ponder whether it is due to the emblem. Sanga recalls that prior to their departure, Siak had etched the emblem at that location, proclaiming it to be a safeguard configuration. Sanga inquired about its nature, to which he responded that it was a technique that drives away creatures. Intrigued, Sanga questioned him on the source of his knowledge, but Siak informed her that she would never comprehend it, even if he explained. The straightforward explanation is that he acquired the ability during his time in the alternate realm. Now, in contemporary times, Sanga inquires of Siak whether the technique can fend off any creature, but Siak responds in the negative. He informs her that the shield is ineffective against genuine monsters. Siak is narrating this to Sanga when the samurai traverses the boundary as though it is non-existent. The warrior's right eye begins to illuminate, and the crimson beam converges on the automobile. Sanga promptly realizes this, referring to it as the mental eye. Siak feels perplexed by this, yet he is certain that the ambience has become bleak. Nevertheless, he does not feel endangered by it. Rather, he suddenly observes that Sanga is already trembling because of it. Sanga explains that the mind's eye refers to the capability to foresee an adversary's assaults. She discloses that, despite being adept experts, it remains a challenging method. Observing how unsteady Sanga appears, Siak encourages her to not be fearful as methods such as the imagination are merely deceptions. Siak then instructs Sanga to observe him intently as he is about to demonstrate how to handle circumstances such as these. Siak's gaze begins to radiate and, abruptly, the samurai begins to perceive trepidation, prompting him to brandish his weapon uncontrollably. Siak then nonchalantly strides towards the samurai, informing Sanga that such expertise is something that can be attained through practice. Fundamentally, the method responds to aggression or apprehension. As a result, the samurai is oblivious to this. He merely remains stationary, attempting to appear formidable. Siak informs Sanga that various abilities such as the imagination, the heart's blade, and the condition of altruism are akin to siblings. Siak approaches the samurai with no animosity within him, and he effortlessly brings him down in a single motion. The samurai is crippled by Siak's blow, and Siak nonchalantly informs Sanga that all the methods he referenced are unremarkable. He notes that the misconception referred to as enlightenment is frightening, as individuals become thrilled by a particular label and choose not to delve deeper. Siak informs Sanga that what is significant on the battlefield does not require an extraordinary designation. Siak discloses that he can assert this with certainty now because he had to relinquish much to break free from the snare. Siak informs Sanga that the samurai is genuinely formidable as he endured being struck by a vehicle and lived. Yet it is unfortunate that his ultimate skill, which he depends upon, is merely the insight of the mind. Upon absorbing all of this, Sanga is plunged into a realm of introspection, questioning what accomplishments she attained during the conquest. Sanga swiftly understands that she cannot acquire knowledge in the manner she desires with a lackluster commitment, given her invaluable objective to chase. She modestly requests Siak to truly instruct her this time. Siak is astonished by her plea since he is already instructing her, but Sanga informs him that what she seeks is straightforward direction, not counsel. Sanga expresses that she has already noticed her vulnerabilities and the urgency for her to become more resilient swiftly. Siak inquires about the rationale behind this, and she discloses her desire to bring Club Shaddai to a close by her own means. It appears that Club Shaddai ranks among the 8 most severe corrosion chasms globally, and it gained notoriety for engulfing the Himalayas in a single inhalation. Siak is aware that her objective is more significant than usual, and he inquires whether she is pursuing it for retribution. Sanga affirms this, stating that she is seeking retribution for her family. She subsequently produces a card informing Seok that she is not requesting him to instruct her without compensation. Seok examines the card and discovers that it is associated with the KY Group, which has a market capitalization of $257 trillion. Sanga reveals that it is the enterprise her family possesses, and Seok is astonished to learn that Sanga hails from a distinguished lineage. She states that the proprietor of the business is her grandfather, but she relinquished her chance in the succession rivalry. Seok realizes that Sanga could potentially re-enter the competition for succession if she excels as a hunter. Seok subsequently inquires about her specific desires. Sanga requests him to craft her the finest, assuring him that she will provide him with potions in exchange. She informs him that she intends to procure items that are difficult to acquire, such as elixirs not available through standard distribution avenues. As Seok is also seeking to enhance his strength, Sanga informs him that it will be achievable with the variety of potions she intends to supply him. Seok understands that Sanga will not even trust him if he informs her that he has previously attained the domain he aspired to. The primary motivation behind his efforts to become powerful was to restore the planet to its former state. Seok subsequently clasps Sanga's hands to convey that they have reached an agreement. He provides her with a catalog of his desires and proposes that they transport the captives to the medical facility initially. Following the release of the captives at the medical facility, Sanga inquires with the physician about the duration required for their rehabilitation, noting that there are 7 individuals suffering from nutritional deficiencies. The physician informs the pair that it would require a minimum of 1 week before dialogue can commence. The physician guarantees the pair that they will be the initial ones informed when the captives regain consciousness. Thus, it is crucial for them to permit the individuals to recuperate. Seok concurs with the physician, and he beckons Sanga to accompany him as their practice commences at once. As soon as they arrive at a location suitable for training, Seok chooses to pose an inquiry to Sanga prior to their commencement. He inquires whether she believes she can evade his spear should he strike with maximum force. Sanga anxiously responds that it will be challenging, given the significant disparity in skills between them after all. Nevertheless, Seok informs her that she can indeed evade it if she maximizes her sensory awareness to its fullest potential. He advises her that she must observe with her vision, listen with her auditory senses, inhale the aroma, and sense with her epidermis. Once she has completed all of these tasks, she is anticipated to combat within the domain of awareness, not oblivion. Having elucidated all of this, Seok resolves that it is time to put her to the test. Before Sanga fully comprehends the situation, Seok has vanished, leaving Sanga bewildered as he attempts to find Seok. Before long, Seok materializes behind her, directing his spear towards her throat, while informing her that she completely misunderstood due to her sluggishness. He clarifies that her perceptions take precedence, while thoughts follow subsequently. He informs her that in warfare there is no opportunity for contemplation, as she must embrace her perceptions as they present themselves and act. He conveys to her that the senses she is yet to perfect will merely mislead her during conflict. Once he finishes reiterating, Seok proposes that they transition to the hands-on component. In the meantime, there is a security guard observing their rehearsal, and the guard is astonished, even when his companion arrives to observe. They are both rendered speechless. The terrain designated for training becomes utterly ravaged by the two as they clash swords like lunatics. Seok ensures to complicate matters for Sanga so she can become powerful as quickly as she is able. As the conflict persists, Seok springs into the air, poised to unleash a formidable blow that even Sanga comprehends she couldn't evade. Just as the strike is on the verge of making contact, the security personnel contact Seok, informing him that one of the survivors has just regained consciousness. Seok subsequently chooses to conclude the initial training session at that point, as it seems that Sanga has managed to grasp the technique of blocking to some extent. Sanga looks on in disbelief, unable to comprehend that all her experiences up to this moment are deemed the first training session. As Seok steps into the healthcare establishment, he inquires if the survivor is all right, to which he affirms positively. He subsequently discloses that a vehicle arrived at the location where he was imprisoned, and unusual individuals emerged from the truck. Sanga inquires whether these individuals were fellow captives, but he replies in the negative, indicating that they appeared too composed to be hostages. Furthermore, he observes that the creatures were not hostile towards them, and it even appeared as though the creatures were assisting them. He discloses that several captives were lifted and transported to the vehicle. Upon hearing this, Seok ultimately comprehends what he has been striving to grasp. He has been pondering the peculiar rationale behind the presence of only 7 captives. Seok subsequently inquires of the survivor regarding the individual who got away, but the survivor informs him that it was not an act of escape. Evidently, the villains deliberately released them, and this discovery astonishes Sanga to her core. Following the conversation with the gentleman, Seok and Sanga ultimately grasp the nature of the situation they are facing. Seok expresses his curiosity about how a non-military individual managed to exit effortlessly from a location that he and Sanga struggled to access. Sanga subsequently inquires with Seok whether he believes that participating in the mission was a setup in its own right. Abruptly, Seok articulates in a frigid manner. Inquire how audacious the villains are to execute such a despicable maneuver. Sanga is completely perplexed as she is unaware of the reason behind Seok's anger. She is uncertain whether it is due to the adversary's underestimation of him or because they utilized human lives to entice him. The duo subsequently inquires of the survivor if there is any additional information he can provide, and he discloses that around the waist of the individual who exited the truck there was a feline mascot. Eventually, Sanga manages to decipher this, and when Seok inquires how she accomplished it, she reminds him that his mobile device is not merely for embellishment. In Seok's justification, he informs Sanga that ordinary individuals such as himself are burdened with a substantial internet charge as soon as they activate the internet function. Sanga is astonished that the guy continues to reference the early 2000s. Shortly thereafter, they encounter the guy they have been searching for. The guy has a visage adorned with numerous piercings, and Seok playfully ridicules him, inquiring whether he utilized a sewing machine to mend his unattractive visage. Nevertheless, beneath the surface, Seok perceives that the man is not an average individual, and he even puts on a brave front as he greets Seok and Sanga on the grand stage. The man then presents himself as Kim Joo-yeon, informing them that he intends to capture them unharmed. Seok ponders the implications of this statement, and he opts to demonstrate his meaning. He seizes an individual who is partially bruised and hurls him into the chasm behind him. Sanga is astounded by this sight, and she thinks that those cast into the chasm will remain trapped until the chasm is obliterated. Yet unexpectedly, the guy ejected into the chasm emerges back outside, and he has already undergone a transformation. Nevertheless, Joo-yeon is not particularly satisfied with the fellow's metamorphosis as he appears quite feeble. With a swift strike, he propels the guy soaring into the horizon. Sanga is frightened upon witnessing this, causing her to ponder whether the villains intend to transform them into rift beings as well. Joo-yeon takes pride in this, asserting that the sacrifice of ordinary individuals has not yielded optimal outcomes. And the instant he utters this, it becomes clear to the duo that the villains weren't extorting cash from captives. However, we're conducting trials with them. Joo-yeon informs the pair that he is genuinely indifferent towards them, but due to the significant purpose and his superior, he will elucidate it just a single time. He discloses that he and his kin are the progeny of Dangun. Evidently, their exclusive objective is to preserve and enhance the authority that South Korea presently wields, ensuring that no one can interfere with them. Upon concluding his explanation, he pounds his foot on the ground, releasing a colossal surge that propels vehicles into the sky. Joo-yeon subsequently propels the vehicle towards the tube, but Sanga arrives just in time, dividing the vehicle into 2 parts. Joo-yeon gets ready to confront the guy while emphasizing that their nation is already a global powerhouse. However, the guy contends that it is insufficient. Joo-yeon rushes toward them, proclaiming that they will elevate the nation to levels where no one would even contemplate looking down upon them, thereby transforming it into an undeniable superpower. He vaults into the sky, intending to execute a dropkick on Joo-yeon. He brings to mind for Joo-yeon all the difficult moments when they had to make sacrifices in the past, and even lower their heads in embarrassment. As he confronts Joo-yeon in a battle, he expresses his desire for them to reclaim every ounce of humiliation they have endured. During the confrontation with Juyeon, she realizes that he holds a black belt in Taekwondo and possesses remarkable speed, despite being unarmed. Juyeon is swiftly struck in the chest, propelling him far away. Following Juyeon's final strike, he comes to the realization that while he is swift, his strength is, in fact, controllable. Juyeon genuinely comprehends the perspective of the individual, as the complete disappearance of all corrosion rifts would make it challenging for Korea to sustain its existing status. Seok eventually discovers that the guy and his team have no desire to rescue the planet, and he verifies this. Seok emphasizes to him that innumerable individuals are on the brink of death, indicating that they should be a top priority, yet Juyeon admonishes them, claiming they lack understanding. He notes that they have already discovered a method to manage the rifts. As soon as Seok hears this, he comprehends that having the ability to manage the rifts has fundamentally altered the circumstances, as their mastery would alleviate their current suffering. Seok then requests a pause, informing the individual that he is already contemplating collaboration with him. He inquires about the degree to which they can manage the rift, and if his response is satisfactory, he will transfer Sang-ah to him. Sang-ah is taken aback upon hearing this, and Juyeon interjects, stating that they have managed to exert just enough control over the rift. Seok halts him instantly, clarifying that by just enough he signifies that complete control has not yet been achieved. Seok reprimands him, asserting that he boasts grandly, yet he is worthless in terms of delivering tangible outcomes. Seok refers to Juyeon and his entourage as a band of ruffians who lack any understanding of their actions. This infuriates Juyeon, and he charges at them with a forceful kick. Seok narrowly evades the strike, causing the earth to fracture at the spot where the man descended. Seok understands that he may have provoked the guy in a manner that he did not intend. He was merely attempting to delay in order to restore Samana, since the bar on the glove had already diminished to just one. Seok realizes that the optimal course of action in his present circumstances is to involve Juyeon in a prolonged struggle. Juyeon rushes towards Seok, but Sang-ah steps in to block his path. Juyeon playfully mocks her, suggesting that he thinks she was positioned at the back due to fear. As the electrifying aura radiates from her form, Juyeon playfully jests, suggesting she possesses a certain degree of bravery at the very least. Seok then implores Sang-ah to hold back, asserting that she isn't capable of managing the guy, but Sang-ah counters that she can observe the remaining battery life of Seok's gloves. She realizes that Seok requires some time, and she inquires about the duration he needs. Seok responds that he needs 5. Moments later, Sang-ah produces a bottle of potion, instructing Seok to relinquish the battle to her. Sang-ah begins to radiate from the potion's influence, and Seok expresses concern that she may become overwhelmed. However, Sang-ah reassures him not to fret, as the potions are intended for crises, and they are indeed facing a critical situation. Alright then encourages her to endure for 5 minutes, vowing to conclude the battle afterward. As Sang-ah gets ready to put her life on the line, she advises Seok to ensure it is significant when the moment arrives. An intense clash unfolds between the pair, prompting Sang-ah to invest all her energy into the battle. As the combat scenario intensifies, she successfully executes a vertical cut on Juyeon's depiction, allowing her a moment to determine if she could overcome him. Nevertheless, Juyeon emerges behind her and delivers a powerful kick that she is hurled through the atmosphere with blood streaming from her mouth. Just prior to her landing, Seok completes her energy buildup and seizes her. In a composed and frosty tone, Seok inquires of Juyeon whether he is at last prepared to meet his end. Juyeon is astounded as he perceives the surge of mana in the individual, pondering how he accomplished it, as there seems to be no feasible way to amass such a substantial amount of mana in such a brief period. Juyeon is perplexed, leading him to question whether Seok had been concealing his genuine power all along. Seok inquires of Juyeon why he appears so astonished, as he is merely adhering to the same principle, much like his piercings. The guy is astonished when he discovers that Seok has unraveled his secret, and Seok informs him that only a fool would be unaware. Seok informs Juyeon that he is emitting mana excessively due to overexerting himself with powers beyond his capacity. Nonetheless, due to his negligence, he managed to regain his contradictory fire. Juyeon believes Seok is speaking nonsense, since there is no way to reclaim squandered mana. Nonetheless, before he realizes it, Seok has materialized behind him, informing him that it is unnecessary for him to understand, as he is on the brink of death. Seok unleashes his 16-strike combination on the guy, cutting him in numerous manners while releasing paradoxical fire upon him. Jaeon is astounded when he discovers that he is unable to inhale and cannot even shift his limbs. Seok praises the individual for his effort to remain upright despite having depleted all of his muscle power. Becoming aware that his demise is imminent, the man implores his commander to rescue him. Abruptly, a missile hurtles towards Seok from. Prior to that, and Seok is able to perceive this before it becomes excessively tardy, he brandishes his spear, deflecting the assault. The offensive appears to have originated from Jaeon's leader, who is positioned on the terrace. He wears a disguise with a hood shrouding his head. He praises Seok for successfully thwarting the assault, as he had previously aimed to shatter his wrist. Seok is intrigued by the identity of the man, and instinctively he can already perceive that the man is Jaeon's leader. Although Seok is reluctant to acknowledge it, he understands that the individual is at least twofold stronger than Seon. Upon further inspection, he swiftly adjusts his assessment. Him coming to the understanding that the man is 4 times more powerful than Seon. The captain subsequently mocks Seok, inquiring if he harbors no fear of demise. Seok tranquilly responds that he harbors no fear of death, as he understands that the man would have taken his life if he truly desired to. As the captain restrains him and brings about his demise, he inquires whether his fascination lies with the dark fire that he wields. By showcasing the ebony flames, those engulfing Jaeon intensify, inflicting excruciating agony upon him. He implores for rescue, and the captain commands Seok to douse the fire, indicating that he will not say it again. Seok understands that Jaeon's mana has already been exhausted, yet the captain has been sustaining him with his own energy. Moreover, he is aware that had the arrow fired by the captain been directed at his head rather than his wrist, he would have perished. However, the captain deliberately chose not to do so. Seok has no alternative but to liberate Jaeon from the bonds of his fire. Before Jaeon can even descend, the captain swiftly reaches out in an instant to seize him. This additionally terrifies Seok, as he can perceive just how swift the guy is. The commander reprimands Seok, accusing him of completely dismantling Jaeon's existence by condemning him to a lifetime confined to a wheelchair. The commander then readies his bow, stating to Seok that while he indeed prefers to capture him unharmed, it is not essential for him to be in flawless shape. Alright then instructs the captain to proceed with his intentions, as there is no possibility of him becoming his marionette. Observing Seok's obstinacy, the captain opts to retreat, as he remains eager to learn more about the dark flames that Seok is wielding. Prior to disappearing, the captain informs Seok that eventually he too will be subjected to his dominance. Once he has departed, Seok comes to the realization that he has become ensnared with an individual who possesses a truly irritable disposition. Sangha approaches Seok, stating that it seems the antagonists are pursuing his distinctive ability. Seok acknowledges this but informs her that he is unaware of the reason behind their interest in his talent. Sangha subsequently inquires of Seok why the antagonist didn't simply seize her as a captive, to which Seok responds that they may be aware of her history. Nonetheless, Sangha is skeptical that terrorists would contemplate such considerations. Seok then advises her to contemplate it thoroughly, as the terrorists could potentially be receiving assistance from the Korean government. Seok implores Sangha to keep this information confidential. However, Sangha points out that she is an adept at deception to that degree. Seok proposes that they postpone everything else and address the division before them first. Nonetheless, Seok instructs Sangha to remain behind as he proceeds alone. He implores her to relax and recuperate until his return, and he plunges into the chasm. Seok touches down in the level 2 rift and discovers a spectral fortress situated at the very core of it all. He strides toward the fortress, and he can perceive a distinctly perilous aura radiating from the stronghold. Without receiving any indication, Seok deduces that the essence of the deterioration lies behind the door. Seok acknowledges to himself that he needs to exercise caution, or he risks perishing if he lowers his defenses. He forces the door ajar and remains upright. In the far-off view lies a sizable cauldron departing. It is acceptable to contemplate whether the vessel is the essence. Seok is astonished as it deviates from his anticipations, but abruptly a hand seizes his leg from the rear. The man appears utterly wretched and in agony as he implores Seok to rescue him, lamenting that his legs are lost. Abruptly, a tentacle surfaces from the vessel and hurls the defenseless individual into the cauldron. Shortly thereafter, the fellow surfaces from the vessel and he has already been transformed into an undead being. OK promptly realizes that the cauldron has been the source of the reanimated corpses. This infuriates COK to such an extent that he nearly loses his composure. Abruptly, he perceives a haunting voice manifest in the space, concerning COK as an additional offering, but acknowledges that COK is somewhat distinct from the rest. The visual accompanying the voice quickly materializes, revealing the essence, which is a warrior wielding a sword. The man then brandishes his sword and encourages COK to follow suit, claiming he will forge his blade with his own blood. COK is taken aback by the presence of the individual, as the intensity radiating from him is suffocating. This simply demonstrates the captain's strength, as he managed to overpower the formidable swordsman whom he gazes upon with trepidation. COK frantically fears that there must be someone else more powerful than the captain. COK is engulfed in contemplation when the swordsman lunges at him, nearly severing his head, yet he narrowly evades the attack. This indicates to COK that the individual he is confronting possesses considerable strength. Nevertheless, COK opts to unleash his full potential from the outset before the foe can discern his vulnerabilities. COK launches a vigorous assault at the center, intending to conclude the battle decisively. To his astonishment, the adversary withstands his utmost effort using merely his sword. As though that isn't frightening enough, COK is anxious that he didn't even notice the guy thwart the assault. Prior to COK being able to respond to his surroundings, the adversary has wounded him, cleaving his form with his blade. COK is astonished and terrified when he discovers that the foe is swifter than he had anticipated. The swordsman nonetheless praises COK for causing him to evade his crucial targets, given that COK is putting on a brave front. The swordsman opts to challenge him with a greater peril. He executes swift and formidable strikes towards COK, physique prompting him to drop to his knees, observing the extent to which the circumstances have deteriorated. COK comes to the conclusion that he has no alternative but to unleash the paradox flame. Nevertheless, he encounters a dilemma regarding this, as the adversary is not a sentient entity, rendering the paradox ineffective as an offensive move. COK is left pondering his next course of action, yet he succeeds in regaining his composure with the paradoxical flame. The fighter is astonished that COK still possesses the vigor to rise, prompting him to contemplate what he must do to bring him down. Before COK realizes it, he gets sliced several times once more. On this occasion, it deteriorates further as every fiber in his physique is shredded, and COK nearly slips into oblivion. Fortunately for him, the muscles above his shoulders remain capable of movement, and he realizes that employing paradox flame to enhance his recuperation and swiftly mend his strained muscles. By swiftly executing this maneuver, COK manages to position himself behind the adversary, and he is convinced that he finally possesses an opportunity. COK initiates his action, but to his greatest astonishment, the adversary disappears directly in front of him and re-emerges behind him. The adversary ridicules COK, mocking him for being overly sluggish, and brings COK to the ground. Nevertheless, he declines to eliminate COK, and COK seizes the chance to sprint backward. The adversary mocks COK, claiming he has failed, but COK shouts at him not to provoke him, as he could have certainly taken his life if he so desired. COK inquires of the adversary whether he is playing with him out of compassion. The adversary concedes that he had the opportunity to eliminate COK, yet he has since transformed into a different individual. He notes that currently he is unable to even remember his name, and the majority of his recollections from life have vanished. He discloses that the deficiencies in his method resulting from amnesia were genuinely lethal. He indicates that following his defeat, restraints were imposed upon him. COK understands that the individual is in a contrasting condition to his own, as the physical form endures, yet the experiences and recollections have nearly vanished. COK realizes that the restraints on the man's neck are the subject of conversation between the captain and Jin. The adversary begins to discuss the extent of what he has forfeited due to his reputation, reflecting on what motivated him to become a swordsman. He states that what persists is bitterness that is infused with grief. At that moment, the warrior warrior undergoes an abrupt metamorphosis, and Sok acknowledges that the man's bitterness has become even more intense. Nonetheless, he has forfeited a considerable portion of his skill and expertise. Sok is convinced that he has a possibility of triumphing if the guy does not eliminate him with a single blow. Sok then resolves that it is moment to harness his complete strength if he intends to overcome the fencer. The fencer is astonished when he discerns that every one of Shock's injuries has been mended, enveloped by the dark flames that cloak his form. Sok then rests his hand on the earth, and the swordsman expresses his astonishment upon discovering that Sok possesses a remarkable talent. Nonetheless, he observes that the fire is consuming something different, and Sok praises him for his keen insight. Sok clarifies that the black flames incinerate ideas. Although the black flame may seem to wield boundless annihilative strength, that is not truly the situation at that time. It appears that the larger the magnitude and breadth of the idea, the more mana it requires. As extensive applications are more challenging to manage, Sok understands that he needs to exercise caution to avoid being overwhelmed by the repercussions. Sok understands that he wouldn't have had to fret over regulation if it were from that era. He has been utilizing the fire with minimal danger. However, on this occasion, it seems that he cannot afford to be selective regarding it. Sok then informs the warrior that he intends to incinerate all the resilience in the vicinity. The warrior is perplexed by this, and Sok informs him that he is not prepared to clarify his position. Without a moment's pause, Sok lunges towards the man with his spear. He succeeds in driving the adversary away, and Sok understands that he can leverage the situation to his benefit, having already discerned that the swordsman has a restriction. Noticing the gravity of the circumstances, the warrior proposes that they move the confrontation outdoors. An intense confrontation breaks out between the two, and they attack one another with fervor. They demolish structures, fracture poles, in an attempt to capture one another. Sok quickly becomes inundated, and his lance is even severed in two. The adversary subsequently releases a formidable strike that ought to have concluded Sok, yet it misses its mark. Sok successfully penetrates a rock formation while sprinting in the direction of the adversary at a dazzling velocity. He howls like a lunatic before striking the swordsman with his armament. This initiates repeated assaults that propel the swordsman backward. Observing the immense strength of Sok's strike, the swordsman is compelled to inquire about his identity. The guy is still attempting to recover from Sok's previous assault when he emerges from above, executing flawless laser incisions on his physique to fragment his form. The warrior howls in agony as he diminishes the bulk of his vitality. However, Sok remains unfinished. As he approaches the guy once more, the pair ultimately injure one another. However, Sok's strike penetrates more profoundly, cutting the man at an angle. The pair refuses to relent as they cry out in agony, and this brings Sok back to the time when he inhabited the alternate realm. An individual inquired what actions he might take if he encountered a foe who was his equal. Sok responded that one of them would not emerge unscathed. Currently in the chasm, Sok's formidable strike successfully delivers a crippling blow to the swordsman, despite requiring all of his effort. Nevertheless, Sok manages to smile in the conclusion because he is the most formidable. As the fencer vanishes, the fisher grants Sok a prize akin to the time he triumphed over the Grade 2 Corps. Sok is pleased that the prize consistently appears just as it does in the alternate realm. He inspects the container and discovers a spear tip, leaving him puzzled regarding its intended use. Nevertheless, he spares no moments in determining it as he hurls it into the expanse prior to. Recollecting it, he understands that he can utilize mana to prolong its duration. He recalls that prizes are purportedly distributed according to the quantity of individuals who have entered the rift, and he longs he had instructed Sangha to accompany him while she remained in a secure location so she could attain one of the prizes. He subsequently observes that the adversary's blade remained and resolves to claim it. Shortly thereafter, Sok resurfaces to discover Sangha slumbering. He hurls the sword at her to rouse her, and she is astonished as it appears unlike anything she has encountered previously. Sok informs her that he discovered it during his travels, and he guarantees her that it is an exquisite weapon, as the individual who brandished it was no trivial matter. Sangha examines it and concurs that the blade is quite exquisite. She inquires about its origin. However, a fatigued Sok assures Sangha not to be concerned about it. All he wishes to ascertain is whether she received sufficient relaxation during his absence. Before he has the chance to utter anything further, hunter, Seok also loses consciousness. Sanga is astonished, yet this merely indicates to her that Seok is also mortal. Due to the perilous nature of a grade 2 rift, everyone went into a frenzy upon learning that he had conquered it single-handedly. The community begins to become frantic over this issue since even proficient hunters struggle to accomplish it on their own. His visage is showcased ubiquitously for the public to view, establishing him as the foremost celebrity. Subsequently, Seok awakens in the medical facility and comes to the realization that he is unable to venture outside due to the throng waiting for him. Shortly thereafter, a woman donning spectacles entered the chamber and introduced herself as Ya Soo-young. It seems she hails from the Secretariat of the Embargo Tower. Seok invites the woman to enter while expressing gratitude for her assistance with his medical expenses. Nonetheless, he informs her of his astonishment as he has never encountered the name Embargo Tower previously. Soo-young responds that they are not widely recognized by the general public since their primary domain is ICT. Soo-young instructs him to inform her if there's anything causing a hindrance, but Seok responds that there is nothing amiss. Nonetheless, he conveys his curiosity regarding a matter. He informs Soo-young that he realizes the medical expenses are substantial, implying that the institution seeks something in return from him. Without delay, Seok inquires of the woman what it is that they desire from him. Prior to uttering a word, Soo-young presents Seok with a cake to savor. When they feel at ease, she informs him about the protective energy source. She notes that it is a mechanism designed to establish a shield to protect against corrosive entities. Essentially, the organization seeks Seok's assistance in conveying this crucial equipment. Soo-young informs Seok that it remains a prototype crafted in the United States, but if it proves to be successful and enters mass production, it will provide some respite to regions that hunters are unable to access. Soo-young informs him that it is a vital undertaking that could possibly alter the destiny of humankind. Se discovers that it is a substantial request and Soo-young verifies this, stating that they are presently examining whether there are additional hunters who are prepared to collaborate. Seok inquires about the other hunters, and she notes that Janabi has already consented to assist. Upon hearing this, Seok comprehends that the situation is more extensive than he had anticipated. Soo-young indicates that they will convey the shield generator via rail. Once they depart from Vladivostok and it reaches the Netherlands, they plan to utilize a helicopter to transfer it to the UK for a trial operation. Seok inquires why they are exerting themselves to travel to the UK, and she discloses that one of the significant fissures, Ristorante, is found in Naples, Italy. Evidently, the impact of this fissure extends across all of Europe to North Africa. She indicates that the sole secure location remaining is the UK, as it is somewhat shielded by the ocean. She discloses that Europe is presently engulfed in chaos, with administrations struggling to operate effectively. It seems that predatory corporations have taken command of numerous areas akin to warlords. Consequently, it appears they will also be responsible for delivering humanitarian aid at the behest of global entities. This instantly informs Seok that there will be several individuals aiming for the train. Soo-young then inquires whether Seok has ever journeyed abroad, but he replies in the negative. He informs her that the assignment will be his inaugural experience abroad, and Soo-young cautions him that it is probable they will face perilous circumstances out there. Seok is perplexed by her use of a plural expression, and she discloses that she will also be accompanying him on the mission. Seok then informs Soo-young that he would prefer Sanga to join them. He reassures Soo-young that Sanga is a reliable companion, and without hesitation, Soo-young agrees to Seok's proposal. Seok is pleased with the entire arrangement, as it would enhance his authority even further. Subsequently, Seok ascends to the rooftop, where a helicopter awaits his arrival, and he is astonished that the president of the association is the individual who accomplished it. The individual informs him that tackling the Grade 2 rift independently alters his outlook on matters, and he assures him that the organization will make every effort to support his endeavors to the utmost. At his core, Seok feels a sense of satisfaction in having demonstrated his abilities, as this has simplified matters significantly. Simultaneously, he contemplates whether the chairman is aware of Jae-yeon and his associates. He is eager to discover whether the president desires the situation that has occurred on Earth to persist or to cease. The instant Seok enters the helicopter, he is astonished to discover Sion awaiting him. Sion praises him, stating that tales about him have circulated widely. It would be simpler to discover an individual unfamiliar with him than to locate one who is acquainted with him. See All Right then inquires about their destination, and she discloses that they are en route to a military installation. COK inquires about the reason for their destination, and she discloses that the South Korean armed forces are also intending to engage in the initiative. COK recognizes that every nation would likely be eager to engage, as a successful outcome would diminish the dependence on hunters for national security. Nevertheless, COK doubts that South Korea would be inclined to support this initiative. COK then inquires if Sion is familiar with the group known as the Descendants of Dangun, and Sion affirms this, asserting that they are an extremist organization. COK notes that he encountered them while conducting the operation on Suhima Island. If one informs him that the heirs of Dangun, consisting solely of Koreans, have been appearing everywhere, and while hunters are engaged in resolving a rift, the faction unexpectedly emerges and disrupts the process. COK contributes his perspective on this matter, and as usual, if one presents him with a sweet, departing, leaving the fellow to ponder why Sion is acting this way. At that moment, Sion inquires of COK whether he has ever departed from Korea, and COK is taken aback that she is posing the identical question that Soo-young asked him. COK nonchalantly responds that it is his initial experience, and, if one informs him that the task would make him comprehend a multitude of concepts. Shortly thereafter, they reach the convention center where the mission briefing is taking place. The individual presiding over the gathering is a major general known as An Hoon-so. Documents outlining the mission specifics are disseminated to all individuals present in the chamber, and the commander informs them that their responsibility is to safeguard an 80-car train, of which 65 will be designated for freight and various functions, resulting in just 15 cars available for the hunters who will be taking part in the operation. Evidently, Sion will be receiving an entire vehicle for her own, and COK is not particularly astonished by this, given that she holds the 10th position among hunters, thus necessitating a different level of treatment. Hoon-so continues to assert that the safeguarding of the invaluable load has been entrusted to Janabi, the limited band of hunters. Nevertheless, he desires the South Korean armed forces to offer greater assistance due to the remoteness. If one interrupts him, dismissing the proposal, informing the general that their sole responsibility for the shield generator inherently places a significant target on the cargo. Consequently, Sion prefers that no one but Janabi comes near the shield generator. The general is daunted by her presence, and he concedes to this. Thus, they advance to the subsequent stage. He indicates that numerous dangers are anticipated along the path, as they will be traversing the UK, the Netherlands, and other areas. It seems there are multiple areas of deterioration on the journey they plan to undertake, but only 7 sites pose a significant threat level. He notes that in addition to the corrosion fissure, beings and marauders wandering the Siberian territory present challenges to address. Sion is somewhat dissatisfied with the reality of confronting train bandits, as though they are participating in an action film. Hoon-so mentions that they have dispatched correspondence to the 8 overlords who have entrenched themselves in Europe, but only 3 have provided a satisfactory reply. Consequently, COK hastily deduces that the remaining 5 are adversaries. The hunters gathered in the chamber are already apprehensive about the perils that the assignment entails, while determining that it could potentially be an unsuccessful outcome. Noticing the squabbling among the hunters, Sion interjects, encouraging everyone to settle down tension while reassuring them that she will ensure the train arrives at its destination securely. On the day of the procedure, the train is fully ready to leave from Vladivostok station in Russia. The guides are prepared to organize the attendees into the different carriages of the train. COK is compelled to traverse a considerable distance to reach his coach. To his astonishment, Sangha is already present, and she prompts COK about his pledge. She informs him that she intends to deliver the potions she assured him of following the assignment. COK conveys his astonishment at her sudden emergence, while Sangha nonchalantly responds that she traveled in a lavish vehicle in first class, hence he clearly couldn't spot her. COK then comes to the realization that this is the identical reason he failed to encounter Sion, and he concedes that being a top-tier hunter has its advantages. They are engaged in the midst of their conversation when Soo-jong arrives, voicing her astonishment at the immense size of the train. She inquires of COK whether he has explored the surroundings, but COK informs her that he has just arrived as well. Nevertheless, he conveys his astonishment that they are implementing excessive security measures on the freight train, which will render it conspicuous. COK then clarifies to him that it is composed of of depleted uranium, the identical substance utilized in the construction of armored vehicles, thus rendering it comparatively safer. C agrees with her statement, finding reassurance in Sion's involvement in the endeavor. Thus, barring any unforeseen complications, they are likely to reach their destination without incident. Moments after the expedition commences, they are swiftly confronted by corrosive fissures, compelling COK to intervene. The hunters situated atop the coaches that were initially assaulted are already battered from the minor adversaries' corrosive fissures launching their attacks. COK exerts his utmost effort to fend off the creatures, as he seems to be the sole effective tracker in the vicinity. Evidently, Sion is presently inaccessible, and this is due to the Trans-Siberian Railway being impaired. Therefore, for the train to operate seamlessly, the maintenance and railway refurbishments need to occur concurrently, given that the team tasked with mending the railway cannot fend off the corrosive entities unaided. If one is compelled to remain alongside them to safeguard them while they carry out their duties. COK is not convinced by the leader's suggestion to allocate their strongest resource for safeguarding personnel. Following an extended battle with the creatures, and in the absence of any indication that they are diminishing, COK understands that they have a lengthy day in front of them. Those individuals, simultaneously in Khabarovsk, located in Russia, become the challenged military leader, Nikolai Baranov, is observed hauling a battered and bloodstained creature over the frigid white snow. Before long, he encounters an eccentric individual who has arrived to meet him. Abruptly, the creature awakens and darts towards the chieftain. The chieftain bides his time to cultivate his energy, allowing the creature to draw nearer, before unleashing a devastating strike to obliterate the creature's head. Following the merciless elimination of the beast, the chieftain shifts his attention to his unforeseen guest, Lai Haiyun, who indicates that he has arrived to assign him a mission. Haiyun expresses his astonishment at Nikolai's handling of the creature. Nikolai notes that he indeed captured the beast for a meal, yet it astonishingly revived after he had rendered it unconscious. Haiyun is astonished that such a hideous creature is what Nikolai intends to consume, and with this realization, he deduces that his contemporaries in Korea are truly experiencing the existence. Nikolai inquires of Haiyun about the assignment he intends to assign to him, all the while emphasizing that he does not possess an obsession with wealth. Haiyun guarantees him that he is cognizant of his preferences, and he discloses that a train will be traversing the path shortly. Nikolai is skeptical about this since the Trans-Siberian Railway was dismantled long ago. Haiyun dispels his misunderstanding, informing him that among those who have harnessed mana are individuals capable of swiftly mending damaged items, provided they possess the necessary materials. Nikolai is astonished to discover that the train is indeed operational despite undergoing repairs. He inquires about what they are transporting. Haiyun informs him that this matter does not concern him, but he ought to be more worried about who is operating it. Nikolai eagerly inquires about who is in charge of the train, and Haiyun reveals that it is none other than Siyun, the confectionery vendor. Nikolai is astonished to hear this, and he inquires of Haiyun whether he has already devised a strategy for confronting Siyun. Haiyun guarantees him that they have this situation managed. Nikolai grins through clenched teeth, eager to relish every moment as he prepares to heist a train guarded by Siyun. Haiyun promptly clarifies the situation, explaining that it is not a matter of theft since Siyun is safeguarding something precious aboard the train. Nikolai then inquires if he is permitted to obliterate it, but Haiyun informs him that this is also not an option. Haiyun informs him that his assignment is to penetrate the train compartment and link the terminal he possesses to the apparatus within. Nikolai, with his brutish appearance, is primarily focused on demolishing objects. He inquires with Haiyun about whether he has the liberty to destroy the cargo once he finishes connecting the terminal, to which Haiyun responds that he is at liberty to do as he pleases afterward. With this, Nikolai eagerly embraces the position, as he eagerly discloses his intentions to eliminate all the other hunters right in Siyun's sight. Back on the train, the other seekers who are meant to be assisting Siyok are left gazing in admiration, as they are unable to fathom that Siyok is genuinely a novice hunter. In reality, they consider him to be more of a beast than the creatures they are meant to eliminate. Siyok, conversely, feels disheartened by the hunter's frailty. Although it remains early in the journey, they are already fatigued, which is not a source of pride. Siyok determines internally that it is largely an individual struggle. But at that moment, he recognizes a well-known voice instructing the hunters to rise again, urging them that their task is not complete and they must remain vigilant. it turns out to be Senga. And Seok jests about her tendency to be a show-off. Seok feels gratified that he has someone in the group who is dependable to count on. Abruptly, the train jolts forcefully, and Seok ponders whether they encountered an avalanche. At that moment, communications arrive from the command hub informing the hunters that they have encountered a hindrance, yet the train will continue as scheduled. Abruptly, Siyun interjects, commanding the train to cease its motion, due to having been surprised by the adversary. Suddenly, a colossal surge of energy hurtles toward them, and Siyun swiftly springs into action. She extends her longsword to intercept the energy surge. Gazing into the horizon, Seok and Senga are astonished to witness a substantial array of troops advancing towards the train. Senga is left pondering how they arrived at this point, and Seok reprimands her for neglecting to review the mission summary. He informs her that there is only one individual capable of executing such a task in proximity to Khabarovsk, and it is Nikolai the chieftain. Seyun is issuing commands when a few strange amulets encircle her, enveloping her to generate an energetic aura. Senga perceives the abrupt quietness from her and inquires whether anything is amiss. Seyun subsequently discloses the sorrowful predicament she has encountered, which is the reality that she has been confined. The command center subsequently informs all the hunters of Seyun's inaccessibility, and this astonishes the timid hunters. The command hub informs them that the adversary's strength is approximated to be nearly 500, which is tenfold their existing combat capability. The command center informs the hunters that there is no possibility for withdrawal, despite the absence of their leader, thus their responsibility to safeguard the train persists. Seyun subsequently elaborates on the directive, instructing her allies to track down the villains. Seok is the first to assume command, and he leaps from the train with the aim of confronting the villains halfway. As he vaults off the train, he instructs Senga to accompany him, and the remaining hunters stand in disbelief at how wild Seok has become, as it is a 50 versus 500 scenario. However, the hunters understand that they have no alternative, as they cannot permit novices to perform their duties on their behalf. Seyun guarantees her companions that she will exert her utmost effort to rejoin the fray at the earliest opportunity. Nonetheless, the individual concealed by the emblem reveals themselves, and it turns out to be Hayun. Hayun advises Seyun against deceiving herself, as it will not be simple for her to liberate herself. Hayun presents himself to Seyun, informing her that he is a descendant of Dangun. He goes on to discuss their familial lineage, merely to emphasize that he is Seyun's relative. Seyun disregards him and attempts to cut through the barrier with her blade, yet her blade splinters from merely one blow. Hayun proudly informs Seyun that it is not a seal that can be easily shattered, advising her not to exert herself unnecessarily. He even proposes that Seyun concedes, as she has exhausted all her resources. However, Seyun interjects, urging him to cease making such a commotion over a single shattered blade. Seyun strikes the band adorning her digit to summon its energy, and, at that precise moment, a different magnificent blade materializes in her grasp. Hayun is truly astonished when he witnesses this, since he had not anticipated her to present the ring. It appears that he is familiar with the ring, referred to as the Mirror Ring, which Seyun acquired after successfully navigating a Grade 1 corrosion rift. Supposedly, the ring has the capability to register precisely one piece of equipment, and the registered item is immediately replicated the instant it shatters, returning to the owner's possession. Despite having an endless array of weapons available, Hayun believes it is ineffective to persist until she shatters the seal. Seyun dismisses his naive notion with amusement, as she elevates her blade with an immense power. In the theater of war, Nikolai confidently informs Seok and Senga that they stand no possibility of defeating him and his allies. Owing to his suit, he can spring into the sky, allowing him to gaze down upon Seok and his companions. He mocks them, proposing that they relinquish their arms because he may very well spare their existence. Seok conveys his astonishment at Nikolai's ability to soar through the air, despite perceiving no mana emanating from him. Senga subsequently reveals that the suit is a creation from the Predator initiative undertaken a decade ago. Allegedly, it was engineered to enable the wearer to combat without the need for mana, and to enhance its appeal, it incorporates a translation function. Senga discloses that the South Korean armed forces constructed several of the suits for practical evaluation, but they abandoned the effort due to the challenges in acquiring the necessary materials. This causes Seok to ponder why such a formidable armament would be under the control of a Russian warlord. Sanga, conversely, is troubled by the reality of having to take lives, prompting her to contemplate whether she is genuinely prepared for this. Seok perceives her concerns and reassures her that she is at liberty to remain behind if she feels incapable of taking human lives. As they hasten towards the opposing troops, Sanga directs Seok's focus to the reality that he has never taken a human life either, yet she remains unaware of the countless individuals our main character has slain to endure in the alternate realm. Sanga is occupied conversing when Seok demonstrates his capabilities by precisely severing an adversary's head. Sanga remains frozen in disbelief, and Seok informs her that she is permitted to proceed if she wishes, but it is crucial to ensure that the remorse does not overwhelm her. Seok asserts with certainty that the remorse will inherently dissipate within a few days to a month. Finding himself in a circumstance where he must take human lives once more brings to mind our individual of his era in the alternate realm. Following a period of dispatching the adversaries, he confronts the disheartening truth that they hold the advantage, due to the Goran Vorer Gakwar, as they vastly exceed their numbers. He arrives at the determination that there exists only one method to alter the course of the conflict, and this is aimed at eliminating the adversary leader, Nikolai. Seok immediately shifts his focus to Nikolai, and the instant their gazes meet, Nikolai refers to him as if they are acquaintances. He labels him the newcomer from South Korea, and Seok is astonished that Russian criminals are already aware of his identity. He is progressing at a leisurely pace when Nikolai initiates the first action that nearly severs his head. Seok narrowly evades the blow, and this instantly communicates to him that Nikolai is powerful and swift. He is also aware that his outfit is quite resilient, making it resistant to scratches, which renders him a challenging adversary to contend with. As Nikolai unleashes all his efforts against him, Seok swiftly assesses the circumstances and understands that achieving victory would have been difficult had he not traveled to Tsushima Island. Before Nikolai realizes it, he is abruptly confronted by Seok's assault. He is propelled into the expanse, and upon his arrival, he furiously readies himself to eliminate Seok with all his might. Seok conversely observes that Nikolai has yet to utilize his complete strength, and he ponders the reason behind it. He ponders whether Nikolai is concerned about unleashing a force strong enough to impair the shield generator. Simultaneously, he recollects that Nikolai had unleashed a formidable explosion at the onset of the conflict, which prompts Seok to ponder whether this was solely intended to halt the train. Nonetheless, this cannot be true, as had Sion not intercepted the assault, the train would have been reduced to fragments. This indicates to Seok that Nikolai and the others are already informed about who is orchestrating the logistics. Seok observes that everything seems dubious, from Nikolai, who arrived donned in a Korean military uniform, to Haeun, who appeared precisely when needed to restrain Seun. As the clash between the two persists, Seok comes to the realization that there are several additional dubious elements at play. Before Nikolai realizes it, he is struck by the paradoxical blaze, and since it is the inaugural instance he has encountered it, he remains unaware of its nature. Seok, conversely, is already diminishing the suit's resilience, and with this he intends to conclude the battle as swiftly as possible. Nikolai desperately hurls a forceful strike at Seok, striving to surprise him. Yet he evades and provides a 16-strike combination to Nikolai's physique. When Seok finishes with him, Nikolai becomes aware that there is a fissure in his suit. He becomes frantic upon witnessing this and begins to contemplate retreating to gain some additional moments. Nikolai attempts to take the diplomatic approach by urging Seok to cease hostilities, allowing him to assist in lifting the barrier imposed on Seon. He has not yet concluded his brazen bargaining strategies when Seok provides a forceful strike that cleaves him in two. Seok informs the man that he requires no assistance regarding Seon, as he has faith in Seon's power to liberate herself from her restraints. With Nikolai vanquished, the conflict reaches its conclusion. In the hunters bellow in triumph, Seon praises Seok's abilities, informing him that he surpassed her anticipations, and as is her customary practice, she produces a piece of candy for him. Seok elegantly gathers the sweets while inquiring if Haeun is among the lineage of Dangun, to which Seon affirms. She notes that the guy fled precisely as she managed to unsnap the seal, leaving her unable to pursue him. The other hunters are astonished when they observe Seok devouring the confection bestowed upon him by Seon. They shout at him, questioning why he would consume the candy, but Seok merely gazes at them as if they are an oddity, as they prefer to retain the confectionery as a a prized possession. Sion even mentions that Sok is the sole individual who actually consumes the treats, as everyone else merely gathers the sweets and boasts about the quantity they possess. With this, Sok verifies that Sion is truly a predator among predators. At that moment, Sok observes that the troops are gathering around Nikolai's attire to retrieve it, given that Nikolai managed to acquire a piece of technology that was originally owned by the South Korean Armed Forces. Sok realizes he must have required one of two essentials. The initial group is a formidable alliance that can entirely dismiss the South Korean administration. The second point is that the South Korean armed forces are deliberately endorsing Nikolai's behavior, which causes Sok to ponder whether they can genuinely rely on the South Korean soldiers accompanying them on the train. In another location, Haeun successfully returns to the team's sanctuary, but afflicted with a debilitating migraine due to his excessive use of mana to maintain the seal. He subsequently informs their chief, the individual who brandishes a bow, of his unsuccessful attempt. Nonetheless, the captain is not upset as he maintains that they will consistently face minor setbacks before reaching their objective. He advises Haeun to dismiss thoughts of the setback and to regroup, concentrating instead on what lies ahead. Haeun expresses gratitude to the gentleman for his words of support, and the captain advises him to maintain his dignity. Beneath the surface, the captain is anxious that following Jeon's downfall, Haeun has likewise endured his own setbacks. He is infuriated that he couldn't discern Seok's abilities, as he could have simply opted to eliminate Sok immediately. He subsequently ventures into the concealed chamber designated for their experiments, which is led by a charlatan physician recognized as Seo Jaeyoung-woo. Jaeyoung-woo has the physique of a reclusive gamer who neglects his well-being and spends his days indulging in food. Jaeyoung-woo inquires about the reason for his presence, and the captain inquires about his advancement on the task they are collaborating on. Jaeyoung-woo informs the gentleman that it is achievable, but it will require a bit of time. Nonetheless, he cautions the captain that they require substantial resources, to which the captain responds that there is no need for concern, urging him to persist with his current tasks. Jaeyoung-woo acknowledges that he will exert his utmost effort, but expresses that it would have been significantly advantageous if they could have unraveled the fundamentals of the shield generator. The captain subsequently informs him that he need not be concerned about this, as the expedition through Siberia remains extensive. Subsequently, within the train control hub, they compile the conflict report. It appears that they concluded the skirmish with 5 fatalities and 10 wounded. Consequently, they have effectively diminished a third of their operational strength due to the course of the engagement. Sion subsequently instructs that the wounded hunters receive initial care, as adequate medical attention can only be provided once they arrive in Warsaw, Poland. Therefore, she recommends that they reach out to them beforehand. She inquires of the team leader regarding the warlord governing Poland, and he replies that it is an organization called Mazurka. Sion subsequently advises him to reach out to the Hunter Guild associated with Mazurka to inform them that they are seeking their collaboration. The man informs Sion that reaching out to them isn't the issue, but inquires whether she believes the warlords will be amenable. Sion responds that they have no alternative but to collaborate if they seek assistance from her or Janabi down the line. Within the Hunter Guild Esprit, situated in Poland, the guild chief Robert Dine obtains the communication from Sion, yet he is unprepared to acknowledge it. The guild associates are astonished that Robert is earnestly rejecting a plea from Sion, the confectionery woman. They begin discussing the remarkable achievements Sion has accomplished. However, Robert interjects, asserting that she is merely one hunter, thus there is no reason to leap into peril simply because one woman made a request. To his astonishment, a hunter responds that he is prepared to plunge into danger if Sion is the one making the appeal. Before Robert realizes it, his workspace is already crowded with numerous hunters, who is present to inform him that should he decline Sion's proposal, he can bid farewell to their agreement with the guild. The backing Sion is receiving from the hunters astonishes Robert, who yells at them, emphasizing that Sion is merely one hunter. In truth, Robert is convinced that Sion is no distinct from himself, but it is at this moment that the grim truth of the situation strikes him. The hunters rapidly dispel his conviction by recounting numerous ways in which Sion has directly influenced their lives, from individuals she has rescued in a deterioration zone to those she assisted in obtaining medical care in Korea. Each of them has something positive to express about her. Robert's deputy recognizes the severity of the predicament environment and informs him that they have no alternative but to comply with the hunter's demands, as permitting such a large number of individuals to resign simultaneously would jeopardize the guild. He recommends that Robert express remorse for his previous remarks and embrace Sion's proposal. Robert struggles in torment as this marks the first occasion he is observing the magnitude of Sion's power. Sion, conversely, is concerned about the harmed hunters, and she contemplates whether they will manage to endure for 5 days until they arrive in Warsaw. Sion's hope is that they do not encounter additional difficulties. At that moment, the control center blares over the radio, notifying the hunters that slimes are seeking them, thus everyone ought to brace for confrontation. The pursuers listen to this and begin organizing themselves to ascend to the pinnacle of the train. However, Sion is apprehensive about the existence of slimes in the vicinity. Sion attempts to soothe the circumstances, instructing them to prepare to confront the creatures, while Siok inquires about the nature of a slime. Sion discloses that it is a corrosion entity emerging from a Grade 1 corrosion rift situated in Bratsk, a city affectionately referred to as the refrigerator. Even Siok is astonished to learn this, as Bratsk is situated more than 600 kilometers away from their location, meaning they should not encounter the corrosion entities. Sion jumps onto the train, disclosing that the corrosion zone has likely extended in the interim. She confesses that confronting Grade 1 corrosion beings in their present condition will pose a significant challenge. Siok inquires whether the slimes are indeed that perilous. Sion notes that the slime's body temperature resembles that of liquid nitrogen, indicating that improper contact could cause their gear to freeze and break. Nevertheless, there is an additional matter that warrants attention, and this pertains to the reality that certain slimes exhibit resistance to mana. This essentially signifies that mana assaults will be ineffective against the slimes, and this is validated when the archers release their projectiles at the slimes, yet no harm is inflicted. The hunters panic as they are anxious the train will be inundated if this persists. And even Sion concurs with them that the endeavor will ultimately result in a failure if this occurs. As they all panic, Siok contemplates an idea, and he acquires a bow and arrow from one of the hunters. The tracker attempts to instruct him on the correct manner of utilizing the armament, but he responds that he will wield it in whatever fashion he deems appropriate. Siok draws the arrow and imbues the paradox flame with the aim of incinerating the slime's magical resistance. Siok targets and releases the projectile into the slime, and precisely as he desired, the fire begins devouring the idea he targeted. The hunters are utterly astonished by the way the slime's magical resistance was shattered. Siok realizes it would have been significantly simpler if he had enveloped the entire area adjacent to the train with the paradox flame. However, due to his lack of confidence in his ability to manage it, he is hesitant to take that chance. Siok passes the bow to the hunters and informs them that they are at liberty to launch their assault on the slime once the fire subsides somewhat. The hunters stand in disbelief, and Sune grins as she recollects having witnessed Siok employ the skill previously. With the slime's mana resistance already compromised, Sune perceives no justification for postponing the unavoidable, and she rushes towards one of the slimes. She executes a forceful stroke that cleaves the slime into two. Following several minutes of dismantling the slimes, Sune inquires with one of the hunters about the remaining number of slimes. The hunter responds that only one remains and it is presently advancing towards the train. The predicament rapidly deteriorates as it ascends, and the hunters dread being overwhelmed by the slime's mass. Sune understands that she can sever the slime, but due to its immense size, their tools will be obliterated swiftly, leaving them vulnerable to being overwhelmed while attempting to repair their gear. As he contemplates his next move, Siok disconnects his spear from the shaft end, propels it towards the approaching slime, fracturing it with an immense power. At that instant, all individuals in attendance at the location discover something significant. Everyone could perceive that Siok had the potential to save the planet, and Siok nonchalantly pivoted, informing Sune that he favored cola-flavored sweets. Following the skirmish, the locomotive proceeds onward to Poland. In the course of the strategy session, the team leader informs them that they will be halting in Warsaw for a duration of 3 days to allocate humanitarian aid to the area. He notes that the Mazurka warlords and the Hunter Guild, which have engaged their services, have pledged to collaborate. Sune feels a sense of relief upon hearing this, as they are spared from handling the situation. But she is curious to find out if they have received any communication from the other warlords, apart from Mazurka. The individual responds that no other warlord has responded to their inquiry. However, Seun advises him to persist, as they are clearly going to remain in Poland for several days. Shortly thereafter, they reach Warsaw, and what Seok observed astounded him. He had been informed that Poland was among the superior nations. However, directly at the railway terminal, there are remains scattered all around. Moreover, to exacerbate the situation, there are no signs of plant life to be found anywhere. This causes him to ponder whether they consumed all the consumable trees while reserving the inedible ones for fuel. Moreover, he observes that Seun and the other hunters are merely attending to their tasks, as if it is of no consequence, indicating that what he is witnessing is regarded as routine in the region. At that moment, a warrant officer employed by Mazurka, Joseph Polanski, approaches Seok with a serene expression, inquiring if he is all right. Joseph requests Seok to accompany him so he can guide him to his accommodations. Seok is conveyed in an opulent limousine, yet the entire surroundings are entirely chaotic. The streets are in disrepair and the majority of the structures are in ruins, resembling a true dystopian landscape. As he is the sole individual heading towards his accommodations, while others are proceeding in different directions, Seok deduces that the lodgings are allocated according to status. Joseph subsequently engages in a dialogue with Seok, informing him that he has an offer, as he is presently an independent hunter who does not pledge allegiance to Korea. The guy inquires of Seok his opinion on pursuing a long-term arrangement in Poland. Joseph acknowledges that the facilities and structures are inferior to those in Korea. However, he guarantees that he will possess significantly greater influence. This instantly piques Seok's interest, as he comes to understand that despite the bodies strewn about, the man still wields the authority to nonchalantly present limousines that provide champagne. Joseph states that he recognizes that in Korea, Seok faces numerous limitations constraining his behavior, largely due to the oversight of public perception. Joseph boldly informs Seok that by collaborating with Poland, he will acquire everything he desires, from women for enjoyment to individuals he can violently confront whenever he pleases. These remarks only infuriate Seok further, and he even feels compelled to strike him. Soon thereafter, he reaches the accommodation that had been arranged for him, which is regarded as favorable, yet Seok perceives it as an inexpensive local inn. Seok subsequently observes that there are containers of instant meals on the table, intended to be his nourishment. Seok seizes one of them, and he is examining it when Seok arrives in the most exhilarating manner to introduce herself and requests Seok if he could utilize his restroom since the one in her room is unsatisfactory. Seok permits her, asserting that it is due to their familiarity. Nevertheless, he informs Seok that he has an inquiry for her. He inquires of her why all the provisions in the accommodations are produced in Korea, and she responds that it is due to the policy of the South Korean government. She asserts that other nations enforce a stringent policy regarding the importation of resources generated in Korea, particularly after Korea has utilized a significant portion of the imported materials for domestic purposes. Seok conveys his astonishment that the other nations are genuinely collaborating on this without exhibiting any outbursts. Soo-jung informs him that incurring the displeasure of the Korean government implies that they are unable to seek assistance from their hunters, as visas will not be granted without governmental consent. Essentially, it has become a reality where agriculture and resource extraction cannot proceed without the safeguarding of hunters. As they all strive for survival, they find themselves compelled to acquiesce, even if Korea imposes unreasonable demands upon them. Soo-jung points out that the supplies ultimately become substandard due to their journey from Europe to Korea and back again. Illustrations of this include inferior meat and sprouted potatoes. Seok subsequently inquires about the status of the aid provisions that they are expected to distribute to the area. Soo-jung states that the aid provisions currently being conveyed are reprocessed composite powder number 65. Essentially, it is culinary refuse that has been dehydrated at temperatures exceeding 390 degrees and subsequently pulverized. She clarifies that the figure 65 signifies it contains 65% repurposed organic moisture. Soo-jung then expresses her strong belief that Korea is capable of providing superior resources, yet she is puzzled as to why they would dispatch inferior items instead. Seok informs her that if they proceed with this, it will not benefit those who truly require it. Soo-jung is taken aback by this revelation, and Seok inquires who she believes will ultimately seize all the valuable provisions if Korea dispatches them. Seok understands that the sustenance will most probably be directed towards the warlords, and they could simply relish it by themselves or potentially potentially trade the food to acquire arms. They are unconcerned about this, as it has become a realm where they can evade consequences. Having witnessed everything personally, Seok finally comprehends Sion's remarks that he would come to understand many aspects after journeying abroad. Seok recognizes that he had been considering matters too self-satisfiedly, and as it currently stands, it seems that his reality is more decayed than the realm he was transported to. Amidst all the happenings, Seok has ultimately discerned his rightful position, and he squeezes the cup of noodles in his fist out of rage. Channeling that fury, he approaches Sujung to inquire about where the nearest obstinate chieftain is. Subsequently, Seok discovers himself in Hamburg, Germany. Upon reaching Hamburg, he proceeds to the location where the German warlord Daniel Lewis dwells. He begins assaulting those faithful to Daniel, and upon hearing the distant clamor of turmoil, Daniel inquires of his aide about the predicament. He responds that they are being assaulted by a Korean individual who is physically confronting everyone to inquire why they are not collaborating with the train's functioning. Perceiving that Seok will persist until he captures his focus, Daniel emerges and commands Seok to cease, warning him that he will submit an official appeal to the Korean Hunter Association if he places even a single hand on him again. Upon him, Seok glances at him before delivering a powerful punch to the individual he is gripping, challenging Daniel. Daniel shouts at him in fury, questioning Seok if he wishes to perish. 3 hours prior, Seok had visited Sion's workplace too. Glimpse her. Seok discloses the reality that the progeny of Dangan are attempting to manipulate the decay fissures, and this astonishes Sion. Seok states that this was the information he received from one of their associates whom he encountered in Tsushima. Observing the determination in Seok's expression, Sion comprehends that he has ultimately decided which faction he is meant to align with. Seok expresses that there is no possibility of him harmonizing with the progeny of Dangun, and Sion concedes that she is pleased that Seok has arrived at the correct conclusion. At that moment, Sion is notified that Sangha has arrived to visit her. As Sangha and Seok both fulfilled a task in Tsushima, Sion is convinced that her presence serves the same purpose for which Seok approached her. Upon entering the room, Sangha remarks that she was unaware of the severity of the situation in Poland until she witnessed it firsthand. Sangha inquires of Sion whether South Korea is oblivious to the circumstances of life in other nations, and Sion informs her that this is untrue. Sangha acknowledges that she would have remained oblivious to the situation if she had not been a hunter. Sangha conveys her sorrow while inquiring if there is anything they can do regarding the circumstance. Yet, Sion interrupts, asserting that there is nothing that can be accomplished as it does not fall within their responsibilities. She proposes that Seok and Sangha concentrate on the matters at hand, as they still have much to manage. Nevertheless, Seok informs Sion that there is something he needs to express. He shares his intention to engage directly with the German warlord in his own manner. Sion admits that she is intrigued by his approach. Seok nonchalantly responds that he intends to compel the warlords to collaborate with Four. As the Korean hunters are unable to accomplish that due to their public perception, Seok informs Sion that he is prepared to assume the obligation as he is an independent hunter. Seok conveys to Sion that he plans to travel to Germany to address the matter while the remainder of the team remains in Poland. Sion realizes that Seok's approach is radical, yet she understands that there is no alternative to it. She inquires of Seok whether he will manage alone, and Seok pivots to depart, reassuring Sion that he will address the issue before the distribution of aid in Poland concludes. Sangha volunteers to accompany him, citing potential dangers. Seok instructs her to remain patient and practice diligently during his absence, as he will reprimand her if he returns to find no progress at all, now that Seok is in Germany. Daniel believed they could overpower Seok with their sheer numbers, as there exists a threshold to the mana an individual can extract. And although it was a sensible notion, they were contending with Seok, who is no typical hunter. Before his very gaze, he witnesses his comrades being battered like refuse, and Seok prompts him to decide whether to address the problem through aggression or conversation. Despite all that he has witnessed, Daniel remains resolute and unwilling to retreat, and he instructs his troops to fire at Seok. He had not completed issuing the command when Seok materializes behind him with a blade to his throat. Daniel panics, pondering how Siak ended up behind him. As perspiration trickles down his brow, he inquires of Siak how he intends to manage the repercussions of his actions. Yet, Siak informs him in that moment that he doesn't care in the slightest. Observing the gravity with which Siak approaches things, Daniel ultimately consents to converse. They proceed toward the canopy, and Siak is presented with what is claimed to be cola, yet when he samples it, its flavor is completely distinct. Daniel informs him that the hue resembles cola, and it is also the most accessible to obtain, while acknowledging that it has been quite a while since he last enjoyed authentic cola as well. Siak is astonished that the situation in Germany is even more dire than in Poland. They essentially reside in tents and have minimal access to electricity. Daniel informs Siak that the military installation they are residing in was constructed during the initial phases of the corrosion rift epidemic, and as time progressed, governmental assistance deteriorated further. He informs Siak that the situation has worsened beyond previous levels, making it unsustainable. Siak promptly addresses the issue, inquiring of Daniel why he is not collaborating on the train operation. Daniel states that they are presently facing a circumstance where they require the shield generator even more than the UK due to the erosion gap, Ristorante. Siak recalls that the restaurant corrosion chasm is reputed to be the largest, with effects extending to North Africa. Daniel asserts that the deterioration region currently confronting the UK pales in comparison to their own, as they are frantically attempting to prevent the corrosion area from engulfing them. Siak subsequently informs him that the shield generator is presently in its trial phase, and they require a secure location such as the UK to gather information. He cautions that if he fails to collaborate, it will complicate his chances of obtaining it in the future. Daniel subsequently brings to Siak's notice that despite expressing a desire to negotiate, their current interactions do not resemble a negotiation. Siak ensures he establishes his authority and instructs him to be silent and comply, as he is aware of the situation. Daniel attempts to be obstinate, asserting to Siak that he is clueless as to why he is behaving so arrogantly, as it appears he lacks alternative choices. Siak crushes the cup in his grasp to illustrate to Daniel that the alternative is aggression, which is clearly inadvisable. Daniel subsequently inquires how he would prefer them to collaborate, and Siak informs him that this is not his responsibility to address, as his role is akin to that of a mediator. Daniel inquires whether Sion is the one who prompted him to take this action, but Siak refutes the claim, stating that he merely intervened due to his frustration with the direction things were progressing. Daniel rises from his chair and expresses his curiosity about whether Sion would be audacious enough to act in such a manner. He informs Siak that he is at liberty to depart, assuring him that he will reach out to Sion, yet Siak surprises him by disclosing that he is remaining. Siak asserts that he is not foolish enough to simply accept Daniel's statements at face value. Daniel then inquires whether he intends to stay with them without charge. Siak produces a cola-flavored confection, informing Daniel that it constitutes his payment. He discloses that it was a confection he received after exerting considerable effort to conquer a slime and encountering something he hadn't witnessed in quite some time, and informs Daniel that the Koreans genuinely have it simple, as in Germany they are uncertain about their survival until the following day. It appears that Sion had inquired of Siak regarding his intentions following the assignment, and beneath the surface, Siak had pledged to rescue the world at any cost necessary. As Siak exits the tent, he pivots to inform Daniel that he will soon express his gratitude because he will be the individual to allow individuals to savor authentic cola in a few years. In the meantime, at the fortress in Warsaw, the residents queue to obtain provisions. However, one individual quickly brings up a concern that the meal they are receiving is subpar, especially since they had anticipated something more appealing given that the South Korean armed forces were involved. The provocateur confronts the troops, asserting that they are no distinct from the authorities who are manipulating them. As the man refuses to relent, one of the soldiers aims a shotgun at his torso and fires. The man plummets to the earth, prompting the spectators to erupt in panic, asserting that the troops have taken a life over a minor issue. Nonetheless, the soldiers resolve the matter by clarifying that the individual is still alive since it was merely a salt projectile and not a genuine bullet. The troops inform the populace that they are cognizant of the living circumstances. However, they convey that they cannot distribute substantial quantities of food if they wish for everyone to obtain their provisions. The soldiers warn the citizens that they will not hesitate to deploy salt projectiles against them should they instigate further unrest. As soon as the populace becomes aware of this, it becomes clear to them that the troops cannot eliminate them, thereby benefiting their cause. The entire situation quickly becomes quite chaotic as the troops call for reinforcements from the headquarters. As Se-yoon sits in her office, she sifts through the stack of documents on her desk and comes to the conclusion that they are struggling due to insufficient personnel. At that moment, she is notified that they are receiving a call from Daniel, and Se-yoon eagerly answers the phone, as receiving the call signifies that he has accomplished his objective. Daniel subsequently informs Se-yoon via telephone that they will agree to Janabe's proposal for collaboration. Shortly thereafter, Se-yoon, her retinue arrived in Germany, where they were greeted by Daniel, who remarked to Se-yoon that she had indeed dispatched an unusual individual. In the meantime, Se-yoon is positioned at a distance, observing the interaction between the two factions. Shortly thereafter, Sanga approaches him, inquiring about his activities. Se-yoon responds that he is merely surveying the boundaries. Sanga informs him that Se-yoon is searching for. He and Se-yoon respond that he will go investigate it. He is on the verge of departing when he unexpectedly receives a strange manna emanating from the clock tower in the far-off distance. He spares no moments bounding toward the tower, and when Sanga inquires about his destination, he simply informs her that he needs to investigate something. He reaches the tower and is taken aback to discover that no one is present. Yet he is quite certain that an individual was present. Sayek deduces that the individual had shrouded themselves in mana to evade detection, having realized that he had noticed their presence. Nevertheless, he can still sense the remnants of mana, prompting him to pursue it in order to determine the individual's whereabouts. Unexpectedly, the mana remnants ascend to the ceiling and Sayek glances upward to examine while gripping his spear with one hand. Abruptly, the assailant unveils their presence, slicing through the void with the aim of bringing Sayek down, yet Sayek is capable of responding to thwart the assault. The assailant reveals himself to be an inexpensive samurai individual named Jo Hyum, a descendant of Dangun. Upon discovering him, Sayek informs Jo Hyum that he must eliminate him. Rather than responding to the man's intimidation, Sayek is primarily preoccupied with his firearm, which is a blade that features a walking stick as the grip. Jo Hyum furiously retorts that it is a calamus blade while unleashing a strike formidable enough to fell the tower. Sayek successfully springs back to evade the assault, but Jo Hyum shuts down swiftly. He strikes forcefully at Sayek. Yet he succeeds in evading them, and when Sayek attempts to retaliate, all of his blows fail to connect. Jo Hyum taunts Sayek, urging him to exert greater effort in the battle, and Sayek quickly realizes the challenge he seems to be confronting. He extends his lance to surprise the fellow, but instead of the lance rending his skull asunder, the man's physique fractures apart. Jo Hyum materializes in another location, triumphantly declaring to Sayek that he will never manage to strike him. Abruptly, a surge courses through him, and Sayek narrowly deflects the assault. He manages to preserve his life, yet he endures a laceration on his visage. Nevertheless, he has managed to discern two aspects, with the first being that the individual employs duplicates, and when the duplicates combine, his velocity and strength soar to unprecedented levels. The next point is that Jo Hyum is completely mistaken in his belief that he cannot overcome him. As Sayek and Jo Hyum lock eyes, Sayek persistently assesses Jo Hyum's abilities. Sayek observes that Jo Hyum's velocity abruptly escalated after his split clones coalesced, indicating that his surge in speed is likely an inherent talent. Nevertheless, Sayek is primarily concerned about Jo Hyum's phasing skill, which enables assaults to seamlessly traverse his form. Soon after, Jo Hyum declares his intention to terminate Sayek's existence with the forthcoming strike. Observing his level of assurance, Sayek speculates that no one has ever challenged Jo Hyum's phase-shifting method. Regrettably, his fortune is on the verge of diminishing as he has foolishly decided to provoke the wrong individual. In an alternate realm, Sayek once confronted beings possessing identical capabilities, and his companions were bewildered regarding how to deal with the beings. Regardless of how often Sayek and his team assaulted them, their efforts merely went straight through. They exhausted all options during that conflict, yet nothing proved effective as those beings utilized mana to shift their corporeal forms to an alternate realm, rendering any countermeasures futile. Essentially, the phasing ability typically triggers precisely when its wielder is assaulted. aligning with the velocity of the approaching blow, and enabling them to avoid inescapable strikes. As it reacts flawlessly to the assailant's maneuvers, surpassing the phasing method is nearly unattainable. Nevertheless, Seok succeeded in discovering a gap amid that fleeting moment of turmoil. He meticulously controlled the velocity of his blow, prior to Jo Hyum having a chance to respond. By flawlessly synchronizing the timing needed to leverage the skill's activation opportunity, Seok maneuvered smoothly, penetrated and thrust his spear into Jo Hyum before the transition method could completely manifest. Jo Hyum is rendered completely astonished, and, as he grips his injury, his thoughts race to comprehend what just transpired. He is fully aware of how his ultimate ability functions and has depended on it innumerable times to evade lethal assaults. Yet somehow Seok circumvented it as if the ability had never been there. What puzzles him even further is that at the velocity Seok was moving, it should have been unfeasible for him to arrive at Jo Hyum's location at that exact moment. No matter how many times he replays the encounter in his mind, the result remains utterly illogical. Unable to fathom how his ultimate technique was thwarted, Jo Hyum can only gaze at Seok in astonishment, momentarily questioning what sort of creature Seok truly is. However, Seok does not grant him a moment's respite to unravel the situation, as he promptly initiates another assault. Jo Hyum swiftly elevates his sword, bracing himself to deflect the assault, yet, prior to Seok's blow making contact, a detonation occurs in the vicinity, attracting Seok's focus diverted from the altercation. Rescued by the blast, Jo Hyum feels a sense of relief, realizing he would have been finished if the explosion hadn't diverted Seok's attention. At that moment, Sega communicates with Seok, instructing him to abandon his current task and promptly head back to headquarters. She elaborates that the circumstances are dire, as sarin gas has been unleashed in the northern fringes of Hamburg. Seok is astonished to learn this, as sarin gas poses a significant threat. It is a fatal toxin that immobilizes the nervous system even in exceedingly small quantities. Sarin gas is documented as an outlawed weapon globally in the annals of warfare and terrorism. Once this gas disperses, the entire impacted region transforms into a veritable inferno on Earth. In the meantime, Seok casts a swift look over his shoulder and realizes that Jo Hyum has vanished. Thus, he rushes back to assess his squad. During his return, Seok contemplates the deadly gas assault and questions why they did not target Hamburg directly. He finds this peculiar and suspects that the terrorist organization may harbor ulterior intentions regarding the strike. Seok discovers from Sanga that the sarin gas will envelop Hamburg in 15 minutes. Evidently, the South Korean military assessed this based on the strike zone, wind trajectory, and velocity. To prevent the humanitarian aid from being tainted by the hazardous gas, Sanga notifies Seok that the train will be leaving for the Netherlands in 5 minutes. Seok subsequently inquires if there are no additional adversaries, to which Sanga responds that there is merely one, but Seyoon is managing to keep him at bay. At that moment, Seok ultimately comprehends the adversary's strategy, and when inquired about it, Seok clarifies that they are attempting to detach Seyoon from the locomotive. This is due to the fact that without her, seizing the train would be considerably simpler. Seok then inquires about whom Seyoon is battling against and discovers from Sanga that it is the identical hooded marksman they encountered in Tsushima. Before long, the metropolis descends into complete turmoil, triggering widespread panic among the populace, as Seok silently observes the desperate predicament. Meanwhile, Seyoon is facing intense opposition from the proficient marksmen hailing from the lineage of Dangun. Although recognized as one of the most formidable, Seyoon continues to contend with this exceptionally adept marksman. He skillfully evades strike after strike, but as yet another formidable blow approaches her direction, Seyoon discovers she is at a standstill and depleting her energy. Nonetheless, she declines to yield and readies herself to halt the assault with every ounce of power she can summon. As blast after blast detonates throughout the station, one of the trackers proclaims that the aid provisions have been completely loaded onto the train. Upon hearing this, all the other hunters rush to board the train as it gets ready to depart from the station. As soon as it is declared over the intercom that all staff members are accounted for, the leader instructs the train to leave. The locomotive promptly starts to depart from the terminal, as individuals indoors gaze incredulously through the window while detonations persistently occur all around. A few hunters who observed Seyoon's battle are curious about the identity of the archer she was contending with. They observed that Seyoon appeared to be becoming inundated by the marksman and couldn't resist speculating whether she was being bested by him. Abruptly, a scraping sound from the upper part of the train captures the hunter's focus. As they pivot, pondering the source, Seok unexpectedly emerges from the upper panel, exclaiming that he just managed to catch the train. All are astonished to encounter him, yet Seok disregards their amazement and inquires about their activities. Perplexed, one of the hunters inquires about his meaning, and Seok clarifies that there is no space for leisure. He emphasizes that Seyoon is not engaging in such an intense struggle merely for them to unwind and remain idle. He additionally informs them that an unfortunate event is imminent now that the adversary has distanced Seyoon from the locomotive. Shock then emerges once more and instructs them to ascend with him as they must brace for the worst. Rather than promptly pursuing Seok, a hush descends as the hunters linger in place, contemplating whether to heed the advice of a newcomer. In a fleeting instant, one of them conveys a message to the other hunters dispersed along the train, instructing them to proceed to the shield generator in accordance with Seok's orders. At the station, Seyoon continues to contend with the formidable marksman. She observes that the marksman is exceptionally proficient and contemplates whether he is the chief of the offspring of Dangun. The marksman eventually addresses her, praising Seyoon for her remarkable abilities as a 10th-ranked hunter. He expresses admiration for her capability to successfully deflect all his assaults thus far. Grinning, Seyoon insincerely expresses regret for disrupting whatever he had organized. Nonetheless, the archer assures her not to fret as the strategy was to detach her from the locomotive. He asserts that their triumph was predetermined the instant the train departed without Seyoon. In other locations, a multitude of individuals from the lineage of Dangun assemble for the subsequent stage of their strategy. At the forefront is Haeyoon, the individual who previously ensnared Seyoon within a barrier alongside a female associate named Yangju. Soon after, Seok obtains intelligence that a questionable faction has been detected on the bridge ahead. While the members of the descendants of Dangun get ready to launch an ambush on the train, Seok instructs all hunters to get ready for combat. Moments later, Yangju, Haeyoon, and their crew board the train. As it traverses the span, as the intruders arrive, an intense conflict erupts between the two factions as Seok's team of hunters strives to safeguard the shield generator. In the meantime, Yangju serenely welcomes Seok as though she had been anticipating this encounter for quite some time. Seok is astonished and queries how the unfamiliar person is aware of him, prompting him to inquire of Yangju if she recognizes him. Yangju responds affirmatively and discloses that her higher-ups instructed her to apprehend Seok in a living state. Nonetheless, she declines to comply with them, asserting that she isn't precisely suited for capturing detainees. Furthermore, as her higher-ups are absent to oversee, Yangju asserts with certainty that she intends to dispose of Seok and attribute it to a mishap. Consequently, no one will deem her accountable for failing to apprehend him alive as instructed. After boasting in true villainous fashion, Yangju gleefully presents her weapon of preference, the jaejeom, a conventional Korean musical instrument. Seok is taken aback by Yangju's selection of weaponry, yet remains distinctly unimpressed and unaffected. Yangju subsequently commences to perform on the jaejeom, assaulting Seok with the sonic vibrations. Seok swiftly covers his ears while expressing his irritation that her talent is rather bothersome. Nevertheless, he does not consider it valuable if that is the extent of her contributions. Abruptly, another bothersome fly, Haeyoon, starts to sway and recite incantations while jingling copper bells and wielding a blade. This is a traditional dance executed by Korean shamans during a ceremony. Haeyoon persists in executing his spiritual ceremony, targeting the incantations towards Seok as Yangju supports him, rising, strumming the chords of her jaejeom. Seok observes that Haeyoon's performance isn't a typical ceremony, but rather a powerful ability, enhancing Yangju's sound waves. At that moment, the shockwave resulting from their united onslaught ruptures from Seok's side of the carriage to Sanga's side. Sanga swiftly pivots as she becomes aware that the sound is emanating from Seok's direction. She worries that Seok could be seriously harmed if the sonic blast is intense enough to be audible from her location. As Sanga anticipated, Seok is hemorrhaging from every orifice while grasping his ears in response to the shockwave generated by the coordinated assault. Nevertheless, this has no impact on him whatsoever as he smirks playfully, informing Yangju that her music is utterly rubbish. However, Yangju takes great pride in herself as she informs Seok that he can never silence her voice, exuding a sense of smugness. She asserts that Seok's demise is inevitable, regardless of his efforts to resist. Seok laughs at her foolishness, and as dark flames start to manifest from his form, Seok readies himself to demonstrate to Yangju what genuine talent entails. An instant later, that tiny ebony blaze detonates into a massive one as as Seok releases his contradictory flame. Yongju is puzzled as she contemplates what kind of deception Seok has planned, hesitant to take any chances. She attempts to signal Haeyoon to brace for the forthcoming assault. Yet, at that instant, Yongju is taken aback to discover that she is unable to produce any sound. Bewildered, she inspects her mouth to confirm that the opening is still intact. In the meantime, Haeyoon is undergoing a similar ordeal as he becomes aware that his voice is not emanating, regardless of how loudly he yells. Nonetheless, Seok is not astonished that they are unable to acclimate to a soundless combat zone. Seok then abruptly disappears just as Yongju is about to depart. Her pondering his whereabouts, she is astonished that Seok possesses such an array of cunning strategies. And in spite of being in a perilous predicament, Yongju still possesses the audacity to ridicule Seok's minor stratagem. For some inexplicable reason, Yongju irrationally thinks that Seok is at a disadvantage regardless of his actions, as the confrontation remains 2 against 1. In Yongju's view, even if Seok succeeds in executing a covert strike on Haeyoon, she can simply eliminate him, or the opposite could occur. Evidently, Haeyoon and Yongju have already consented that one among them must jeopardize their life merely to seize Seok. However, events appear to be diverging from the intended course as Yongju observes that Haeyoon appears somewhat disoriented, yet aloof. It suddenly occurs to her that she could be the one being targeted, rather than Haeyoon. Regrettably, by the moment she comprehends the situation, Seok has already emerged behind Yongju, poised to attack her before she has the chance to respond. Discussing the strategy of Yongju and Haeyoon prior to initiating this battle, they concurred that it was acceptable for one of them to perish. But at the 11th hour, Haeyoon altered the strategy, which is why Yongju felt disoriented for a brief moment. Just as Seok is poised to attack Yongju, Haeyoon calls out for him to halt, and Seok is swiftly encircled by amulets, confining him within a shield. It appears that Haeyoon had been orchestrating this from the beginning, as he was unwilling to relinquish either Yongju or himself as initially intended. Yongju, now severely injured, inquires why Haeyoon did not adhere to the strategy. Upon hearing Yongju utter Haeyoon's name, Seok finally identifies the individual he has always referred to as the squinty-eyed fellow. Merely moments after the obstruction is established, Seok's paradoxical fire slices through it as effortlessly as parchment. As Haeyoon continues to strengthen the incantation, Yongju subsequently reprimands Haeyoon for disregarding her, as the strategy was to incapacitate Seok prior to employing the barrier for his confinement. Haeyoon, with his eyes still shut and unaware that his seal has already been shattered, informs Yongju that he had no alternative. Unaware of his failure, Haeyoon rejoices internally, convinced that he has ensnared Seok. After all, his barrier successfully halted formidable officials from the lineage of Dengun, as well as the mighty Seoon. Haeyoon is certain that this very seal should be more than sufficient to confine an ordinary novice. Convinced that Seok has been immobilized, Haeyoon narrows his eyes slightly, preparing to devise a strategy for retrieving the shield generator when he observes a shadowy outline of Seok free from any confines restraining him. He merely narrowed his gaze slightly before shutting his eyes. He is uncertain whether what he witnessed is genuine. After all, it seems implausible for anyone to escape so rapidly, leading Haeyoon to ponder if he was merely perceiving a mirage. Choosing to set that thought aside, he requests Yongju to rise, informing her that they must seize the shield generator and withdraw. However, before he can complete his statement, Seok thrusts his spear into Haeyoon's midsection. Haeyoon is perplexed as he attempts to understand how Seok penetrated his barrier so swiftly. With an icy, menacing demeanor, Seok inquires who granted them the authority to depart and questions whether Haeyoon has lost his senses. At this precise instant, Haeyoon realized he had erred, particularly aware that Seok's strength exceeded his wildest dreams. Filled with dread, he concluded that the shield generator was no longer the foremost concern. Instead, ensuring the survival of the train became their paramount objective. As the understanding dawns on him, Haeyoon cries out to Yongju, urging her to flee. Like a hunter aware that its quarry is defenseless, Seok mocks Haeyoon's statements, urging Yongju to make an attempt to escape. As he twists the spear deeper, Seok urges Haeyoon to attempt to escape alongside Yongju. He instructs them to abandon the shield generator and attempt to flee, as though challenging them to push his boundaries. In the meantime, at Hamburg Central Station, Seoon is continuing his struggle against the bowman, even though appearing distinctly fatigued. Unexpectedly, the marksman opts to conclude his efforts for the day, leaving Seoon bewildered. He then compliments her, asserting that Se-yoon's presence serves as evidence that Koreans represent a dominant ethnicity. Taken aback by the revelation, Se-yoon recognizes that his statements resemble the Hwanguk hypothesis, prompting her to inquire of the archer if he subscribes to such an absurd notion. Essentially, the Hwanguk hypothesis is merely an imaginative concept propagated by proponents of pseudo-history. They assert that Hwanguk governed the entirety of Eurasia approximately 60,000 years ago. Furthermore, they contend that submarines and telecommunication devices were invented and utilized during that era. Evidently, the progeny of Dangun employ this Hwanguk concept to unite supporters around them, and this is a widely recognized truth even beyond Korea's borders. The bowman subsequently informs Se-yoon that he does not trust that nonsense and only madmen would accept it. Therefore, Se-yoon inquires about why he appears to be a devotee, and the marksman informs her that his beliefs are inconsequential, as long as the individuals who adhere to him unthinkingly accept it. And due to their acceptance of such nonsense, the archer is confident that they will assist him in realizing his grand aspirations. Meanwhile, aboard the train, Hee-yoon employs his weapon to slice Seok's spear from his body, inadvertently severing his own flesh in the process. This is one of the crazed followers the archer is counting on for his so-called lofty ambitions. The archer then informs Se-yoon that faith does not necessitate evidence, and one merely needs to believe without question. Following his lengthy sermon, the marksman subsequently disappears right in front of Se-yoon. As the world surrounding her falls silent, Se-yoon rests against her greatsword and exhales a profound sigh of relief. While on the train, Se-yoon is preoccupied with thoughts of Hee-yoon, struggling to comprehend why he would sever his own flesh merely to flee. Nevertheless, considering the severity of his injury, Se-yoon questions whether Hee-yoon can travel far. Just as she ponders whether to pursue them, one of the hunters aboard the train communicates via radio. He informs that they have lost contact with Se-yoon, and in her absence, the temporary command is to be assigned to Seok. As Seok absorbs the instructions, a group of masked individuals from the descendants of Dangun suddenly springs forward to assault him. However, prior to executing even a single strike, Seok promptly incapacitates them with his punch and eliminates the others with a weapon. Following the management of the last pests beyond the train, Seok assumes the role of acting commander of the locomotive. He communicates with all staff, instructing the train to set off without delay. Initially, Se-yoon's followers from Janabi urged that they postpone their departure until Se-yoon arrived. Nevertheless, Seok declined to halt the train, fully aware that this decision could lead to their animosity toward him. Yet, Seok felt no remorse for his resolution. Evidently, he undertook this action because the train is filled with essential aid supplies urgently required at another location. A few hours following their arrival at the intended site, Seok can't shake off his anxiety regarding Se-yoon's safety and fervently wishes for her safe return. Nevertheless, after some time passes without any word from her, he starts to contemplate the possibility that she may be deceased. However, in the subsequent instant, a tracker bursts in, urgently shouting Seok's name. Seok inquires about the situation, and the breathless individual manages to convey to Seok that Se-yoon has come back. Seok is pleased to receive this information and asserts that he was already aware that Se-yoon could never perish from a predicament like that. Soon thereafter, Seok visits Se-yoon at the medical facility where she is undergoing care for her wounds. He playfully mocks her, inquiring if she feels slighted that they departed without her, but Se-yoon replies that she does not. In truth, she mentions that she entrusted Seok with temporary leadership. Recognizing he would reach the optimal conclusion, Se-yoon engages in a battle with the marksman. Yet she cannot envision a route in which she triumphs over him. Se-yoon elaborates that she likely would have come back in a body bag had the marksman not shown her mercy. Se-yoon subsequently seeks counsel from Seok regarding her predicament, as she feels helpless for not being able to even tread upon the archer's shadow. Seok subsequently reassures Se-yoon, explaining that abrupt realizations are a myth, indicating that it will require some dedication and time for her to discover her direction. Se-yoon feels a sense of relief upon hearing this, which promptly enhances her spirits. She subsequently inquires with Seok regarding the allocation of the aid provisions, and Seok advises her that it is advancing seamlessly. However, in the following instant, Seok grins playfully, asserting that matters are progressing favorably in his own manner. This leaves Se-yoon feeling somewhat apprehensive, aware that Seok's approach is rarely the straightforward one, prompting her to inquire once more if everything is genuinely on track. Seok subsequently informs Se-yoon that the aid provisions for the United Kingdom will soon be packed, and the shield generator will also be conveyed. He urges her to ensure that she takes everything with her. Upon hearing this, Seyoon contemplates whether Seok is residing in the UK. Seok expresses his intention to do so, as the heirs of Dangun are unlikely to relinquish the shield generator without a fight. Seyoon is curious to determine if Seok possesses a definitive strategy to address the situation. Seok straightforwardly informs her that he intends to remain in the UK for the present and enhance his abilities. Subsequently, on his return to Korea, he aims to confront Bratsk's Grade 1 rift. Seyoon is astonished by this revelation and cannot fathom how Seok readily chose to take on a Grade 1 rift. Seyoon asserts that even her own Grade 1 corrosion rift suppression was extraordinarily challenging to manage. She subsequently cautions him that tackling a Grade 1 rift independently will be arduous. However, Seok discloses that he will not venture forth solo. He has already conversed with Sanga, and she has consented to accompany him. Seyoon labels Seok and Sanga as irrational, for she thinks that the challenges will remain unchanged regardless of whether Seok embarks alone or as a pair with Sanga. After pondering for a brief moment, Seyoon declares that she too will remain behind and assist them to the best of her abilities. Although the Bratsk refrigerator rift is considered to be less potent than other Grade 1 rifts, Seyoon apprehensively believes it remains challenging due to its classification as Grade 1. Seyoon subsequently prompts Seok regarding his claim to eliminate every corrosion rift on the planet and rescue humanity. She wishes he can maintain that degree of fervor following his encounter with the Grade 1 rift in Bratsk. Seok merely grins in reply, informing Seyoon that he requires a single favor from. A few days following her arrival in the UK, Seok successfully secures a satisfactory residence for her training. Evidently, it was bestowed upon him with the stipulation of safeguarding the shield generator. Nevertheless, Sanga believes the residence is excessively distant from the site of the shield generator. Seok states he cannot change the situation as the secluded regions offer better lodging options. Given that their objective is to react to issues as they occur, he informs Sanga that it's acceptable, provided they communicate via radio every hour as outlined in the agreement. After considering all these justifications, Sanga resolves to cease his complaints. Seok subsequently inquires about their conversation, and Sanga produces a petite pouch containing several vials of potion. She informs him that the stock is somewhat limited at present, but Seok guarantees her that the sum she provided is sufficient. Without delay, Seok removes the lids from all the containers and fills his mouth simultaneously. Observing his roughness, Sanga inquires whether Seok truly needs to consume them in that manner. Seok subsequently clarifies that it would be even more unpleasant to drink them individually. Following the consumption of the potions, Seok gets ready to instruct Sanga. Sanga is perplexed that Seok intends to utilize eggs for the training, but Seok informs her that eggs serve as a natural instrument for education. To illustrate, he lifts an egg with his left hand and another with his right. He directs mana into the orb in his right hand. Subsequently, he cracks both eggs, transferring their insides into a dish. To her astonishment, Sanga observes that the egg yolk and albumen have blended in the mana-infused egg, while the other remains distinct. Seok then inquires if Sanga comprehends what he is attempting to illustrate. She and Sanga respond that this is an exercise in mastering mana control. Seok is astonished that Sanga grasped the idea immediately and clarifies that the instruction is necessary due to her insufficient mana regulation. He subsequently informs Sanga that training in this manner will benefit her, and she can engage in this practice during her leisure hours. Following Seok's presentation, Sanga promptly gets ready to exercise the egg technique, but Seok intervenes. He subsequently reminds her that she is meant to rehearse it during her leisure time as a form of assignment. Sanga feels perplexed as she contemplates her true training. At that moment, Sion makes her entrance, and as she drives her sword into the earth, she confidently proclaims that training begins with authentic combat. She subsequently inquires whether they are prepared, yet Sanga is astonished as the truth dawns on her that she is meant to battle Sion as a component of her genuine training. Sanga remains at a loss for words when Seok responds on her behalf, informing Sion that they are set. In another location within a sinister laboratory, an unhinged researcher hums as Jion reclines, secured to a frigid surface with conduits linked to his physique. He quickly regains awareness, and the physician supervises him prior to heading back to resume experimenting in the laboratory. Jion lethargically inquires about her location, and the man clarifies that Jion is in his lab. He grumbles about the difficulty he faced transporting Jion from the medical facility. Jion is taken aback by this revelation and inquires why the man relocated him. Following a momentary pause, he clarifies that he acted because Ji-yeon is half-conscious and could be weary from gazing at the hospital ceiling throughout the day, immobilized. It is soon disclosed that the deranged scientist is, in fact, Ji-yeon-woo, also a member of the lineage of Dangun. Frightened, Ji-yeon attempts to intimidate him. Yet Ji-yeon-woo merely chuckles, reminding Ji-yeon that he cannot even inhale independently without a mechanical ventilator. Ji-yeon-woo subsequently cautions him against pushing himself too hard, and reminds Ji-yeon that his fury ought not to be aimed at him. Ji-yeon-woo subsequently discloses that he has recently achieved success in a minor experiment, indicating that he desires Ji-yeon to be the subject of his testing. Observing, with a playful glint in his eye, Ji-yeon-woo inquires if Ji-yeon harbors any desire for retribution. Nonetheless, Ji-yeon is filled with dread as the truth dawns on him regarding Ji-yeon-woo's intentions. In the UK, Seok and Sanga are participating in an intense 2-on-1 sparring match against Seon. The instruction has two aims, and one of them is designated for Sanga and Seok to enhance strength while engaging in sparring with Seon. However, given how Sanga is being overwhelmed by Seon, she appears to be making no progress. Sanga attempts to attack Seon, but before she can even move her sword, Seon catches her off guard, departing Sanga bewildered. Nonetheless, just as Seon is on the verge of delivering a blow, Seok unexpectedly employs his spear to seize her sword. This astonishes Seon since she was not anticipating it, while ensuring that Seon's magnificent blade is ensnared. Seok encourages Sanga to strike a blow against Seon. Regarding the two aims of their training, the secondary goal is to enhance the collaboration between Sanga and Seok. Following Seok's effort to land a strike on Seon, Sanga engages her electrokinesis ability as she vaults towards Seon. Nevertheless, Seon intercepts the assault and successfully seizes Sanga's blade, approaching her from behind. Sanga was caught off guard by Seon's ability to strip her of her weapon, yet Seon praises her for her progress over the preceding month. Nonetheless, she vows to instruct Sanga on how to maintain her weapon and prevent it from falling into the hands of an adversary. Seon is on the verge of advancing to the subsequent phase of the training when an urgent message comes through over the radio. Seon learns that the stronghold has come under assault by the heirs of Dangun. An enigmatic dark smoke has entirely enveloped the shield generator. Seok and the others swiftly gear up to leave as the caller demands urgent assistance. Moments later, their vehicle races uncontrollably down the road due to Sanga's less-than-stellar driving abilities. Seon and Seok cling on for dear life, particularly Seok, who has endured this ordeal before. Seok questions why Sanga is behind the wheel again, but she reminds him that she is the sole holder of a driver's license. Seon pleads with her to drive a tad more cautiously, but before she receives a reply, Seon perceives a presence. Abruptly, a grotesque purple creature with tubes affixed to its back materializes in front of their car. Before they can respond, Sanga collides with the entity, throwing them off balance and fracturing the windshield. Once the vehicle comes to a stop, Sanga contemplates whether she struck a real individual. Nevertheless, Seok, who has already glanced out the window, tells her that she did not. Seok does not believe that the violet abomination in front of him is a person. Moments later, the muscular violet figure rises again, proclaiming that it has discovered what it has been seeking. Seok scrutinizes the man intently, and it suddenly dawns on him when he discovers that the being is, in fact, Seon, whom he had previously incapacitated. Seon subsequently shouts Seok's name, asserting that Seok would never comprehend the extent of his sacrifices, merely to discover a miscreant akin to him. Seon 2-0 swiftly charges at Seok, resolute in his quest for retribution. He obliterates a nearby structure, aspiring to defeat Seok. Yet to his astonishment, Seok emerges unhurt, leading Seon to understand that such an insignificant assault could never defeat Seok. In the meantime, as Seok readies himself for the battle, he contemplates how Ji-yeon is able to advance despite having his physical power drained by Seok's contradictory fire during their previous encounter. Although it wasn't included in their strategy, Seok chooses to manage the situation here while Seon and Sanga take care of matters at the base. Seon then instructs Sanga to separate and proceed to the harbor while she heads directly to HQ. Prior to departing, Seon informs Seok that Ji-yeon appears quite irate with her. Thus, she recommends that he ensure he completes Ji-yeon this time. As she departs, she instructs Sanga to hurry to the dock since the vehicle is damaged. Observing the girls depart, Jiyeon ridicules Seon for fleeing like a timid individual and promises to pursue each and every one of them, beginning with his greatest adversary, Seok. Nevertheless, Seok merely chuckles at Jiyeon's foolishness, remarking that an individual possessing the abilities of a local Incheon Batman could never bring about his demise. However, Jiyeon is not insulted by Seok's humorless quips and deems it pitiful as he elaborates that he vowed to deliver the same anguish from the instant Seok incapacitated him. Rather than concluding this pitiful antagonist's soliloquy following that assertion, Jiyeon persists in his tirade, detailing his intentions to dismantle Seok. Subsequently, he lunges at Seok to demonstrate his strength with action. Seok, conversely, concedes that this entire predicament could indeed be somewhat perilous. In the meantime, Sanga quickly reaches the dock, only to discover that all the hunters have perished. As she surveys the surroundings, an individual silently observes her from afar, and moments later they spring ahead, creating such a commotion merely to make an appearance. One of the trespassers is a hooded heir of a Dangun affiliate. The man promptly identifies Sanga as the offspring of the KY organization, and it appears that he arrived with 2 additional thuggish associates who anticipate receiving a substantial reward from Sanga's relatives. Sanga remains vigilant as she contemplates whether the trio of men eliminated the hunters at the port independently. In a bid to buy some time, Sanga amuses them by rectifying their grammar when referring to her as a little lady daughter. She clarifies that combining daughter and lady in that manner creates an uncomfortable phrasing. She subsequently suggests that they just refer to her as the KY Group daughter, or calling her the KY Group Beach would suffice. The masked individuals are perplexed as they contemplate whether she might be a bit unhinged. Following a momentary hush, they erupted into chuckles, labeling Sanga as a simpleton from the village. In the meantime, Sanga endeavors to comprehend which aspect of her exudes foolishness. Believing that Sanga's intelligence quotient might be insufficient to secure a substantial sum from the ransom, the cloaked figures rush towards her, declaring they will leisurely enjoy their game with Sanga for a while. As Sanga confronts the aggressive trio, she is anxious since they each possess double the mana compared to her. Nevertheless, she recalls Seok's remarks, informing her that in genuine combat, the quantity of mana is not what matters, but rather the poise to interpret the dynamics of the encounter. Considering this, Sanga chooses to remain composed, considering postponing until Seok arrives at. It becomes evident that Jaehyun Woo had administered a violet gem into Jiyeon's physique, assuring him that it would significantly enhance his power while granting him a substantial influx of mana, thus freeing him from dependence on a respirator. Nonetheless, there are repercussions associated with this, and they are not the typical consequences. He informs Jiyeon that his skeletal structure will fragment and his visceral organs will contort while his eyes desiccate as if they are igniting. Nevertheless, Jaehyun Woo believes he need not be concerned about this as it is merely a modest cost to obtain a fresh physique. Jiyeon was filled with dread upon hearing this, and Jaehyun Woo scolded him for dreading such a traumatic process more than enduring life as a disabled person. Jaehyun Woo administers the material into his system while conveying that he is presenting him with a chance. Jaehyun Woo informs him that he is receiving the ultimate opportunity to retaliate against Seok for degrading him into worthless status. Jiyeon cries out in agony as the substance begins to manifest within him. His form gradually shifts to a shade of violet while his veins protrude. In that instant of anguish, Jiyeon fixates on eliminating Seok. At this moment, as he confronts Seok, he is dedicating his utmost effort to the struggle. He unleashes rapid-fire blows to Seok's torso, yet Seok successfully intercepts the assaults from making contact with any crucial area of his physique. And at that moment, Seok seizes command by intercepting Jiyeon's assault with his spear prior to thrusting the spear into the earth for utilization. The power applied from this to propel Jiyeon into the sky. Jiyeon is furious that he is airborne and unable to take any action. Yet he vows to himself that by the moment he descends to the earth, he will eliminate Seok. Abruptly, he realizes that Seok is onto a lead, and by balancing on his lance, Seok propels himself far above Jiyeon. Jiyeon observes in shock as he never anticipated Seok's spear could stretch to such an extent. With Jiyeon utterly vulnerable, Seok praises him, informing him that his strikes genuinely land with more force than previously. However, he is more focused on determining whether his resilience is as robust as his fighting prowess. Jiyeon contemplates what Seok intends by this, and Seok satisfies his inquisitiveness by revealing the dual orbit lance method to unleash a tremendous impact from his spear, which ultimately eliminates Jiyeon in a single blow. Jiyeon is propelled away, colliding with a barrier and losing several appendages in the ordeal. Jiyeon expels blood from his mouth while pondering whether the strength he received was insufficient to confront Seok. He pleads for his life to be taken. However, Seok gazes intently at him, attempting to comprehend the situation. He can distinctly observe that mana is coursing through Jiyeon's form in place of blood. Evidently, creating something of this nature would necessitate numerous sorcerers in the alternate realm. Seok is astonished that they did not also eliminate the contaminants in such a delicate process. Having resided in a realm that dedicated millennia to the exploration of mana, Seok perceives that humanity's understanding of mana is relatively limited. In reality, they resemble early humans who have merely stumbled upon fire. To exacerbate the situation, this rudimentary individual has acquired a kitchen knife and is utilizing the blunt edge to slice meat. Although the offspring of Dangun may convince themselves that they originated this innovation independently, Seok has witnessed sufficient evidence to recognize it as merely a landmine deliberately positioned by some force. Seok can unequivocally assert that what he observes is not the result of human effort, yet he is curious about how Jiyeon managed to forge the agreement. In an alternate realm, when a formidable being draws forth its own mana and manifests it for another to assimilate into their physique, they are fundamentally consenting to an exchange. Seok initially perceived it as a minor concern, but after witnessing everything, he understands that Jiyeon had bitten off more than he could handle. Seok is on the verge of commencing his questioning when a luminous gem protruding from his forehead radiates brilliantly. Prior to unleashing a colossal detonation, Seok manages to shield himself from the blast. However, once the chaos subsides, he comprehends that the detonation was intended to obliterate any traces. It appears that Seok has encountered this type of agreement previously in another realm. Essentially, it is an arrangement with a being referred to as the devil, and although he is unfamiliar with the entity that Jiyeon has made a pact with, he is quite certain that the being possesses immense power. Seok is concerned that there are now devils on Earth after he exerted considerable effort to eradicate them in the other realm. At that moment, he observes the distant flashes of lightning and comprehends that Sangha is participating in a confrontation. He chooses to set aside Jiyeon's predicament for the moment while attending to Sangha. In the meantime, at the port, Sangha has already vanquished the trio, yet even she struggles to accept that she accomplished it. All she managed was to parry their assaults, yet she ultimately succeeded in overcoming them in some manner. She beams as Seok had assured her she would triumph, and she indeed accomplished just that. The chief of the trio is still living, and he is attempting to make an escape. For it, yet Sangha ruthlessly eliminates him. Seok is satisfied with her progress, as she managed to conserve her mana during the battle by ensuring she achieved precisely the desired result. She is contemplating whether she executed everything correctly. When Seok materializes unexpectedly to inform her that she has done everything correctly, he mentions that she tends to overanalyze matters excessively. He advises her that during confrontations, all she needs to do is concentrate on the battle at hand. Sangha is taken aback upon spotting Seok, and she inquires about how long he has been observing. Seok responds that he has only just arrived, leaving Sangha in disbelief that he didn't witness the entire altercation yet is already criticizing. After setting aside their typical squabbling, Seok directs his gaze toward the colossal wave apparatus adjacent to them, inquiring of Sangha whether the device in question is the renowned shield generator.